Wheeling Plan Commission meeting for Thursday, August 28th is called to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Dorband.
I'm here.
Commissioner Johnson, I am here. Commissioner Powers.
Here.
Commissioner Stylen.
Here.
Commissioner Vito.
Here.
Commissioner Zangara.
Here.
And Chairman Raffato.
Here. Mr. Jennings, any changes to the agenda?
The Planning Commission did receive a revised agenda packet. There are no changes beyond what was in the revised packet.
Okay, great. Citizen concerns and comments. At this time, it's any citizen can come up and come to the podium and speak on any concerns they have. And I have no one here. So we'll go to consent item, docket number SCBA 14-27, Allstate, 100 to 110 East Palatine Road, appearance approval of wall signs, and docket number SCBA 14-28, Village of Wheeling, 77 West Hints Road, appearance approval of modifications to an existing freestanding sign. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Johnson, second by Commissioner Dorband. Mr. Secretary?
Commissioner Johnson votes yes. Commissioner Dorband.
Yes.
Commissioner Powers.
Yes.
Commissioner Stylen.
Yes.
Commissioner Vito.
Yes.
Commissioner Zangara.
Yes.
And Chairman Raffato.
Yes.
Can I have who made and seconded that, please?
Commissioner Dorband.
Commissioner Dorband.
And seconded by?
No.
Oh, I'm
made
sorry.
by-
I
made by
moved. She
Commissioner-
seconded.
Second by Commissioner Dorband.
Oh, hello.
Okay, docket number PC 14-4, Northgate Crossings, 100 and 250 Northgate Parkway, approval of final plat of subdivision. Mr. Jennings?
Thank you. The plat that was included in the Planning Commission packet has been revised slightly. The revisions at this point are all minor revisions handled by the village engineer. There's no additional modification of the easement areas and non-easement areas on the plat. So at this point, what we're suggesting is a motion recommending approval, subject to the condition that the petitioner complete the final modifications as required by the village engineer prior to printing the Mylar plat for signature.
What are those revisions, if I may ask?
There were some minor suggestion by the village engineer related to the checklist for plat review. There's a series of 30 things or so that we look for on a plat. For example, the zoning designation of the adjacent properties was not shown, so we had them add in the zoning of the adjacent properties, things like that. They're fairly minor that don't have much change of consequence to the commission.
Any other questions?
Well, the buildings that are on here don't necessarily match up to what we've seen, like the clubhouse is not that shape.
Let me see if I can open the, the version. I don't know if we put one in the slides. Bear with me 1 second. I will open this up.
It's page 24, I think.
Is the clubhouse and the pool house. So that rectangle is around all of those items. So that's defining. So the plat, let me see if I can get this big enough to actually read some of it. The plat itself shows the building areas, which are the larger rectangles around. The clubhouse itself has a area that includes the clubhouse, the pool house. Those are the non-easement areas defined here in the fine print. There's a blanket easement over the entire property for the village to access utilities. That blanket easement is also granted to ComEd and some of the other utilities. Then we specified even though there is a blanket easement, we specified the easement location of the water main, sanitary sewer, which are these items that you see snaking around the site. And then there's also a stormwater detention area, easement area, which is what I'm pointing to now. So I don't know why exactly the entire clubhouse area was defined as one rectangle, but that is what you're saying is the pool and the clubhouse together.
So where the hand is right now, Andrew, is that where you're saying the clubhouse and the pool is?
The road comes in, and I believe this one actually is the clubhouse.
Okay.
So it's the clubhouse and the pool next to it.
It just looks like 10 apartment buildings, the way it's illustrated on here.
I think it's a coincidence that the rectangle ends up being the same size. But if you overlay it on the plan, that's what you'd be seeing, is a rectangle around the clubhouse.
Is that something that needs to be addressed?
In what way?
Well,
Here's the,
we're approving the plat. Does the plat signify where the buildings are located?
The buildings are shown as non-easement areas. The site itself has a blanket easement on it. So the building footprints are shown as being outside of that blanket easement. It means that the village has the right to enter any part of the property to fix the utilities that we manage as needed. They have a responsibility to maintain them, but we have the right, if needed, to enter the site. The village has the right to enter the site to perform maintenance, such as flushing of the hydrants, that sort of thing. There are, the buildings themselves are noted with these rectangles as being outside of that blanket easement area.
So where the word lot in bolded there is part of the what do we call it?
clubhouse?
Clubhouse?
Lot, the word lot here, this is a one lot subdivision.
Right.
So what you're seeing is lot one of the Northgate Crossing subdivision. So when it's recorded, that'll be the legal description of this particular parcel as a whole. It will be.
No, I'm sorry. Where the word lot is, that rectangle signifies the clubhouse, pool, and anything that's outside of a common area that the village can go in to fix something, is what you're saying. So that designated area there,
Yes.
which is the clubhouse. So it doesn't signify actual location of buildings.
No, that is the definition of the non-easement area.
Okay.
Okay, that's what I was looking at. Okay,
I have a question. In the past, when we have approved this kind of document, we always, again, in the past, we always had two motions, one approving the subdivision itself, and the second motion was to authorize the chairman and the secretary to sign the document. I have a problem that we're approving an item that they're not going to be able to sign because they haven't seen it yet. and neither have we. It's going to be changed.
It is not uncommon for the final plat to be tweaked for the minor technical requirements before we print it on Mylar. The Mylar is sort of the last step. It usually gets circulated to the other the utility companies first. The village is usually the last to sign those. We don't direct them, we don't clear them to print it for signature until it gets through the process usually.
But nevertheless, this is not a representation of the document that will be signed by everybody.
I would say that it is a representation of that document. It is not exactly that document. It will have a new date on it. The date will be the final date. As I said, the zoning designations of the adjacent properties are going to be added to it.
Mallory, to Commissioner Steinle's point about, well, Andrew said it's a representation of what we're signing, and what we're approving.
Right, and the condition of the approval would have that it complies with all the technical site requirements that the engineer required. So I think that would be sufficient to approve it at this time.
Okay, great, thank you. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
A motion by Commissioner Vito, seconded by Commissioner Dorban. Mr. Secretary?
Commissioner Vito,
Yes.
Commissioner Dorban,
Yes?
Commissioner Johnson is yes, Commissioner Powers,
Yes.
Commissioner Steinle,
No.
Commissioner Zangara,
Yes.
and Chairman Rafano.
Yes. Thank you.
6 yes, 1 no.
Thank you. Calling docket number 2014-14 and SCBA 14-26, continued from August 21st, 2014, Dunkin' Donuts, 749 North Milwaukee Avenue, special use 2014-14 special use site plan approval for a drive-through restaurant, SCBA 14-26 appearance approval of wall and freestanding signs. Mr. Jennings?
Thank you. This item was in front of the commission last week for the opening of this public hearing. There were a handful of items requested by the commission. The petitioner addressed. The petitioner has submitted revised plans, which you received in your revised packet. The primary question that was posed to the petitioner, which was relayed then to the property owner, related to the future condition of the area adjacent to the drive-through. The owner of the property has requested consideration of the commission to have the timing of that sidewalk installation be reflected as a condition of approval. And the ownership group submitted a letter, which I can read. They are out of town. They're not able to attend this particular meeting, but they did send a letter that I'd like to read at this point into the record. It is dated today. Ownership has had the opportunity to review the council's suggestion about a sidewalk, but the current design, the ownership group is currently in the design phase to build a building on Pad B to the north of the proposed Dunkin' drive-through. Upon approval to construct Building B, the site landscaping of the property would change from the proposed form in your recommendation. We're therefore requesting that the aspects of the drive-through plan that affect the area for Building B be temporarily offset from the current plan until the pad design is complete and is complete and can be blended with the adjacent property. I can assure you that it is indeed our intent to make the entire project, both Building B and C, look as though they are one property. If it pleases the commissioners, we would also be willing to agree that if a new building is not complete within an allotted time period on Pad B, we would install a temporary sidewalk as requested. We look forward to the continued success of the development and our longstanding relationship. As always, we appreciate your time and attention to these matters. Sincerely, Robert Ravani, President of the Black Lion Investment Group. With that, the petitioner, we have the revised plans in the slides that you can refer to if you'd like to go down the list of revisions.
Certainly. Good evening, everybody. Good to see you again. At the main, you'll notice in the revised drawings, we picked up all the comments that the commission had forwarded to us, and we show graphically the sidewalk and the landscaping buffer that we discussed last time to the north. But as Andrew just read, as we talked more with the owner in California, they are in the design process for a building to the north, thus their request to make that a condition with a time limit on it as well. If the building takes longer, that they'll still have to come back and do what we're showing on this drawing here. What you don't see on the drawing is the one request for our hardy board. We are going to go up to the, there's a 5/8 version, so we're going to use that as requested. And I believe everything else you see on the drawings. And if there's anything I can answer in question, please fire away.
Great. Commissioner Powers.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So the area to the north of the drive-through, if we're not doing the landscaping aisle, what is the intent of designating that a drive-through lane if the landscape aisle isn't there itself? Are we putting some kind of stripe in the parking lot that'll like designate the end of the drive-through lane? Are we going to put up some horses or something so people don't like go cutting in line? I mean, how are we going to designate if that island isn't there, which the purpose was kind of like to define it? How are we going to define it if that island is not there right now?
The island will still be there. The request for the additional sidewalk and landscaping and those elements that we've shown here added as for future consideration, those are not to be added at this point. There's an elevation change between what we need for our drive-through and that lot to the north. So the curb will go in and the shape of the island will be there. Just additional east-west sidewalk and associated landscape buffer is something that the ownership would like to do at a later date as part of their development of that property.
So you're going to put, you will put a curb on the outside of the drive-through lane, right? It'll be that parking island.
Correct, because that pad is taller than the building next door, and where we have to, where the lot is to the east and the lot is to the west, there are lower elevations, so we need to curb that so we can bring it and connect them together. So there will be the concrete curb as shown. Just the sidewalk and the landscaping buffer as requested by this commission last time is something that the landlord would like to hold off on until he develops the building.
Okay. I had asked about the landscape area in the patio area. I heard a comment about, something was done in North Aurora, but I haven't seen anything additional included in our packet that says what type of plantings are in that area, how big it is. I have no feel as to what that area is going to look like.
Well, if you notice that in front of the building as you go south, there are two landscape buffers that are in the sidewalks there. Mm-hmm. So our goal is to, match that feel of planting so that it stays uniform for the whole building.
Okay, then I'd like to see something in the motion because there's really nothing, I don't see anything in the document right now that states that, so I'd like to see something that says that landscape area in the patio area will be representative of will match the character of what's, in those other couple areas in the front. And I think that's it for now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Zangara.
Thank you. My biggest question, it actually came up this week, is regarding the signs. I know you have that drive-through and the Dunkin' Donuts sign by the drive-through. Mm-hmm. This other building goes up, those signs disappear, basically. Is there any thought of putting a sign, or moving that drive-through sign to the back so anyone at the west end that goes there, it was just a comment that after I heard about the building going up.
Yeah, but we certainly can consider that. To be perfectly frank with you, we don't know what the full plan is for the building to the north. We just know that the developer in California are working on a plan. And if there's any type of buffer that's consistent of what's shown here, if it's 5, 6, 10 feet off that drive, that will still do that monolith look, the gradient hardy board. And the one drive-through sign will probably be on there, until, it'll still be visible for us from Milwaukee, and there'll be some vision to that. But as we look through final signage, it's a great idea to put something on the rear to.
I'm wondering, Andrew, if, would code allow us to put a third sign in the back?
The Commissioner's question, I thought, related to directional signage, or are you talking about
The Dunkin'
wall
Donuts sign the sign that's on the one that actually says Dunkin' Donuts above the drive-through.
This sign.
Yeah, so.
Correct, yes.
If we can put, are we allowed to put a smaller version of that in the back?
So you'd
the
have-
So
you'd
the
have a-
patrons of Weston Hotel can see it?
You'd have a couple of options for this. The code would allow, for example, that the sign that is shown here could be relocated further west on the building, so it'd be visible between the two buildings. You do have a gap of at least probably, I think, 15 feet at this point, at least that large of a gap. So it's possible that you might be able to, if this building were to be constructed, you would be able to relocate this sign this direction. The code does allow a small sign in the rear. That sign is going to be probably smaller than what you would typically construct, but it is possible to identify it from the rear.
Okay.
It's a very limited, the
So
code.
it's really funny that you bring that up, because me and Steve were talking, and I said the same thing. I'm like, once that building goes up, that sign's useless. And his answer was, first of all, we don't know what building it's going to be. I don't think it's going to be a two-story building, but we don't know. And B, it's probably not going to be, it can't be abutted next, because we've got the drive-through lane, and I'm sure you're going to have landscaping then in the future, you're going to have a parking lot. So there's going to be enough of a distance where you will, because I had the same concern. I go, wait a second, that sign's useless. So I do agree with you on that, but until we know what the future building is, it's hard to make any determination. Right now, this is the best visibility we'll have. And I do agree we should put something small in the back. Maybe it's not our full sign, maybe it's just a cup logo or something, so the, residents of Weston could see us.
Okay. Otherwise, I mean, you really upgraded the plan, and I read everything, so I hope it all works out. So I was just concerned because I wanted, like you said, someone in the back to be able to, if they're there, say, where's Dunkin' Donuts?
We'll take all the signs you give us.
But that's all I had.
Commissioner Vito.
Yeah, just one question about directional signs. It was hard for me to determine where exactly they're all going in the back if someone goes in. Can you just point that out really quickly?
Certainly. As Andrew's pointing to right now on the screen, the one to the north, we're putting the one at the north end to direct traffic. People come around the traffic down to where we want them to turn in for the drive-through. And then one at the far south, the same thing, to direct them towards where the Dunkin' is. And then there's a one going just above that steers them into the drive-through lane. So it's really to direct the traffic on the backside of the lot to the proper entrance for the drive-through lane. And then, of course, there's a one at the end of the drive-through that just, it's a do not enter for one side and a...
Do you think the revelation that they're going to put a building in that north parking lot affects any of that signage at all, or you think you're going to have to revise it, or you think it's
No,
okay?
I think those islands, those buffers will be there in some extent, and that would still need to, we still need to direct the cars accordingly to the right entrance for the drive-through, so.
Okay.
I think those will maintain their existence.
That's all I have, thanks.
Commissioner Stalin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really do appreciate the detail effort that you put into getting these revisions back to us in a timely manner, and I'm kind of surprised, Andrew. I think I saw one drawing somewhere along the line that wasn't included in our packet this evening that showed the stacking of the cars and how many would be in...
It's there.
It's on the overall site plan.
That's on the small one.
No, it's there. If
This
you blow
one on the
that
left
up,
right
it's
now.
there.
Oh, you're right, I had to blow it up. And that's that's still an area of my concern, because I hope that you're going to have a lot more cars stacked than this. And maybe we, you know, if the cars do get stacked, you're going to have lines on the pavement. Maybe if it gets too long, keep extending that line down and maybe around the corners so
Yeah,
that...
We certainly can extend, we're already putting the painting on the pavement of the drive-through and extend, and that line as it turns down to the south is painted. That can certainly be extended just to queue the cars up correctly.
Exactly. And I think you'll be very successful. The only thing that, and I have to say I'm really sorry for this, but you're going to rip out a sidewalk, you're going to do some grading there, you're going to install another curb, but you're not going to install a sidewalk right adjacent to the curb that you're going to install. And I've been fighting for sidewalks in this community for 30 years. I've fought for every inch of sidewalk that we've gotten in this community for 30 years. And you're going to destroy many inches of sidewalk, and I can't vote for that. So,
Right. No, perfect.
But I think your plans are great, and I do appreciate all the effort that you put into it. And I think you will be very successful, and I hope and pray that I can get that sidewalk there.
Well, as the landlord expressed, the conditions that were brought upon us by this commission at the last meeting are things that the landlord will incorporate in whatever his new building ultimate design is. He's just hesitant to do this now pending what that final design is. But as Andrew pointed out, and as is written in the letter, which I'm sure you'll distribute copies, if in due process the design or the building stalls for whatever reason, he's committing to doing what we're showing on this drawing here, which is why we wanted to present it to you.
And just to add to that, when we received this letter, I did have a discussion with the property owner about the topic. His current projection of the construction of the building is by January. He's looking to commence construction rapidly. So the allotted time period that he's looking at, I don't think that he would object to that allotted time period being relatively short based on the discussion of January.
I understand, but when he comes back, there's no guarantee that that sidewalk will be on his plan. And I'd like to have that kind of guarantee that there will be a sidewalk somewhere in that immediate area, so.
In between the two buildings?
Yep.
I'll hold off. Anything else besides this?
No,
Great.
thank you.
Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you. Just a point of clarification on the parking to the north now. Whether this building goes up or not, are you going to have some parking at least temporarily there, or they're not going to do anything on that side for now?
The parking that's there now, once we put the curb, we will restripe up to where that curb is now. So what we're pushing back, we're going to put that park, because there's plenty of room between that and the middle aisle. So we've got some room to put the parking back. So our intention is to put, just temporarily the parking back into place.
So you will have some there? Okay.
Yes.
The only other thing I noticed in the staff report talked about 2 tables and 8 chairs, and the drawing shows 3 tables and 12 chairs. So whichever has to get revised.
It's the plan. I didn't revise that particular section.
That's all I had. Thanks.
Commissioner Dorbin.
I have nothing, thank you.
Okay. Just a couple of things. On this drawing here, and I think Commissioner Steinle confirmed it, and you confirmed it also, the lines here are actually, they're going to be painted on there, and the words drive-through are going to be there also?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, painted
Yes.
on. And as I think Commissioner Steiner was talking about, possibly extending those if need be. Okay, then the dumpster area, the existing trash area, I think we read that the owners believe that will suffice for Subway, Dunkin' Donuts. Does that also, is that for the whole building, Spears and?
It is.
Really? And that's enough space?
The owner, and you may have had a more recent conversation, but the owner believed that it would accommodate.
Okay, so what are our plans if it's not? You know, and I know that might not be your issue. Well, it is your issue because this is what we're going with tonight. What are the plans? Because that's actually a brick enclosed area.
It's very easy to get 7-day pickup. Majority of my stores have twice a week pickup. But with all the other businesses there, it's easy to get 7-day pickup. And so if it's an issue, you just increase the amount of times you pick up. And it's a shared cost. It's a shared cost between all the tenants.
Understood, but, and 7-day pickup is great, but how many dumpsters does that area hold for, now we have 3 restaurants and a postage net that I'm sure provides that, you know, it's probably got boxes and things like that that are thrown away. What is the, you know, how many dumpsters can go in there?
I believe you could put 4.
Doesn't seem like a lot. That,
But the majority of the time, it comes down to how many pickups a week. I've been through this many times, and you know, you just have to increase your number of pickups. It just costs more, but you have to increase your number of pickups from 3 to 4 to 5, depending on.
well, what is it now?
I have no idea. I'm sure it's not 7 days a week.
Can we somehow put a condition around that?
It does.
As the garbage goes up, the
There
number
are,
of,
we actually, as a staff, if it's on a 2-day, the health officer deals with this, but if we're on a schedule it's not sufficient and they can't close the top, we'll require them to go to additional through the health officer.
You could put that as a condition. I have no problem.
The condition that's probably a little bit more critical to word would be what to do physically. If it didn't
Right.
physically work, what do you do physically? That's, you know, from a pickup frequency standpoint, the health officer pretty regularly deals with that.
okay. Yeah, but physically, I'm just concerned, what are those dumpsters? Those things are 5 yards? Are they 5-yard dumpsters, the roll-offs? Those are
believe so.
5 yards, so you've got 4, you've got 20 yards of garbage. I guess that's probably a lot. So I just,
Our projection actually was that there could be 4 additional dumpsters beyond what's there. The space currently has 4 in it, one of which is a grease container, so there's 3 regular dumpsters, and a 4th is one of those black grease receptacles.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah, there
our
is room
projection was
for
it could
more.
handle about 4 additional in there.
oh, okay. I thought we were at the max.
Subway's was not in there, and then this unit didn't have a dumpster back there. But it looks like you could probably add several more above what is currently
Okay,
there.
all right. Well, it's still like some type of, well,
Sure, we can certainly
right,
work something.
that they increase the number of pickups, so we don't have that. Now, as far as the sidewalk goes, and I know Commissioner Stylen has aired his concern there, but I guess if, and this is what confuses me, Commissioner Stylen, is that if we put a time frame there, that if there's no, even a plan before us by January, that they construct the sidewalk, I'm not certain what, we have to give them an opportunity to develop it. And we don't know what that building will bring and whether even if a sidewalk would be advisable there. So I'm not sure what sound reason we have besides a condition to say that we build the sidewalk if it's not done by the spring, March 1st?
I don't know either. All I know is that you've got people walking, standing on the east side of the building over by the Hyatt, or excuse me, by the west,
We're not changing, are we already?
that may want to get over to the other side, and they can walk by Spears, or they can walk down if there's no sidewalk, they can walk down the drive-through lane. Otherwise, they'd have to go to the north side of this new building that's coming in. And I just think, they don't have any access to Dunkin' Donuts from the rear. I don't believe that Subway has any access through their building from the rear.
They do.
They do?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, they do.
That's interesting. So then people could cut through Subway to get to the front door of Dunkin' Donuts.
I'm sure he would like to, I'm sure he would like that, but I'm sure Subway wouldn't.
I just don't want people walking down that drive-through lane
And,
trying to get from one side of the building to the other.
and I understand that, I truly understand that, but the pure economics of it, to put a landowner, and we have to, I think we have to take that into consideration, to put a landowner in, to ask him to put, even if it's even $2,000 worth of work into a sidewalk, when he might tear it up, just doesn't make economic sense.
However, I will say that according to the letter that you wrote,
I didn't write anyone.
read, the Northland owner, come January or whatever the date, would be willing to put in a, quote, temporary sidewalk.
Yeah.
And it was quoted as a temporary sidewalk.
And
So
there's a
whether you
cost.
put in a temporary sidewalk today or in January, what difference does it make?
And there's
It's
a cost
temporary.
associated with that too. And that's all I'm taking into consideration,
There-
is the cost there.
The staff we were actually looking at this today. This plan doesn't show it, and I apologize for not having an overall plan handy. This crosswalk does connect to a sidewalk. The original PUD plan did have a walkway that went in front of both of these buildings, and then connected out to Milwaukee Avenue and connected over to the hotel building. And that connection originally was designed to be direct. Because of the grade, it has to ramp up slightly. But this crosswalk here does lead to the hotel building and to this. There's a series of sidewalks on the east side of this drive here. So there is some method of walking outside of the parking lots that is part of this development that's not terribly evident from this plan.
Also, Commissioner, in all practicality, if I'm staying at the hotel and I'm walking out the front door of the hotel, I'm going to go in front of Massage Envy and in front of all the other businesses and get to the Dunkin' Donuts. I'm probably not going to go in the back, just as a consumer.
Well, as a consumer, if I drive over to that Weston parking lot and try to find a spot for my car anywhere in the lot, if I wanted to go to Dunkin' Donuts, odds are I'm going to have to park a block north, a block south, a block east, a block west to get there, because there is no parking in that lot Friday nights, Saturday nights. I don't know how it is other nights. I haven't been there, but it is packed. So people are walking. People walk all over there. I just want to make sure we have.
It's, and I understand that, again, I'm talking strictly economics. But to your point about the parking, which we've all had many discussions about that, I've asked Andrew to look into some other things that we could do in that area, because when they build this next building, that's just going to take away additional parking. And that's just not, and according to what we approved many years ago, right now, there's ample parking on this property, all the lots, everything, there's ample parking to sustain this building and the other building to the south of Cooper's Hawk. There's enough parking.
However, on those, and I hate to disagree
no.
with you, on those original plans, these particular buildings did not have any restaurants involved in them. The restaurants were all,
And I'm not disagreeing. But, so I've asked Andrew to look at that because, the staff to look at that. I didn't want to exclude Brooke because I'm sure she's going to do some looking into this too. But for instance, where they do their valet parking right now. And I think I brought up to Andrew, I'm not sure if I brought it up here, is that one day I was there because I go to that property a lot for the restaurants. And there was a huge tent to the south of the Westin that knocked out all of that parking. All of that parking. And I don't know how we would allow that to happen with all of the parking issues that we've had there on the weekends. And so I think we need to take a hard look at that, just for that issue.
Just a couple of quick thoughts on that while I have this open to this page. The approved PUD, which doesn't have this temporary parking lot in it, the approved PUD has these parking areas here and here as permanent parking. That would be part of whatever's required on B. So those are currently roped off for valet use, and they would flip back. That 20 or so spots would, actually it's about 25 on the approved plan. Those 2 rows of parking would flip back to normal public access and not valet. So that's one item. Then another thought that the staff was discussing earlier today was having some sort of signage to encourage people to use the designed walkway from this area toward the hotel, as opposed to trying to cut through a drive-through, would be another possibility of just telling people who are in this area, no pedestrian access. Walk, the crosswalk is here. It's the same distance to walk. Maybe some sort of directional signage telling people that if they turn this corner, there is a crosswalk. Might be something that could help reduce any sort of pedestrian cut through.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be a great idea. Right. And then the last thing I had, and I think it was brought up last week, was, and I think a couple commissioners had brought it up, was the awnings. We're going to have a different color of the awnings versus the rest of the building. Right. Exactly. That orange is the new black, I guess.
Actually, it looks very cool.
Pardon?
It looks very cool. I just came back from our North Aurora grand opening, and the commissioners there were looking at it, and they were like, wow, this is beautiful. The rest of the center is black, and ours is orange, and it really, I used the word Duncanize the corner, and they were like, wow, you're right, you did Duncanize the corner. And it took, it was a brand new shopping center, also a shopping center that had the space was empty. Dunn Brothers had left there 2 years ago, and we really souped up the corner, and it looked really nice. I can take you to North Aurora if you want to come check it out.
No, that's quite all right. No. Is there any,
And just quickly, do you have our photographs we had last time, the images? Because it is on the other end, well, that's the North Aurora store that Mr. Bojo was just.
It's not yellow.
But if we could go back to the Photoshop we did.
Wrong way, sorry.
You can see the Spears, the awnings are all black, but on the south side of Spears, there's also different color awnings on the building as well. There's I think it's a red awning for a section on that side. So it's, colors change as it wraps around the building, so we felt we were being in tune with that at the end cap, adding our orange on.
It is at the end. Any opinion on orange or black? Commissioner Stylin?
I think the more that they can differentiate themselves, it brings attention and focus to it, whether you might not like the focus, but it does bring focus and attention. I think it will enhance their business.
Commissioner Zangara?
I agree. I'm just afraid that we might have Subway come up and want a green canopy, PostNet come up and want a different, that's all I'm worried about. I don't want the whole mall to become cartoonish.
That's a good point. Commissioner Dorban?
I would have to agree with Commissioner Zangara. That would be my fear, that we don't have too many different colors there.
Well, okay. Understood. Do we leave it this way, or do we make them go black?
Well, you've
That's the
got
question.
a red one on Spear's
Right, I
side.
know, so it's difficult,
But
right.
but now I guess my question would be, and that goes back to staff, is how do we keep from having too many different ones? I mean,
Well, every change would require an appearance approval. So any other change to the awning would require your review.
but do we get in trouble legally then? Because, Mallory, that's your,
I mean, I'd have to look into specifically how the street, this is before you right now as far as what they're proposing, but if they came back, I guess it ties to their brand, so it would depend on, the extent to which the colors, like the awning or anything like that, tied to those other companies' brands. And I'd have to look into it a little more and get back to you on the specific, what you could do if that issue even came up in the future.
so my answer is yes and no.
Thank you. Thank you for that solid answer. Commissioner Johnson?
Well, I guess I'm taking the conservative route and saying it should just remain black for that reason as well, though, because we don't know what's going to happen down the road.
Commissioner Vito?
I think it should be orange. It's their brand color. Subway had the opportunity to push for a green awning. If it was denied, it was denied. I don't think there's a legal issue. I know I'm not the village attorney, but I don't think Subway has a constitutional right to a green awning just because Dunkin' Donuts has an orange one. But I think it looks sharp. I don't think it's a problem, and I don't want them to lose their brand color.
Commissioner Powers?
I'm okay with the orange.
And I'm okay with the orange too. And I got 3 okays, a couple of maybes, and Terry said yes, so we're going to go with orange.
Thank you.
Okay. And thank you, Commissioner Dorban, for saying yes and no. That was fine.
I just want
No, I
to
know.
I want to give you a definite answer.
Definite yes and no.
And
Okay.
believe me, orange is not my favorite color.
Right.
It just
Thank
happens
you.
to be our brand color.
Thank you. So, Andrew, do we have any, does anybody else have any other additional questions?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Andrew, could you pull up the site plan again? Could you indicate where in that plan is the garbage area, just so I know? Right in there, okay. Okay, thanks.
There's a small section of that that's carved out. If you take this sidewalk, this is about a 5-foot sidewalk here, and then come this direction, there's a couple of bollards around the electric panel so that the dumpsters can't roll into it. So there's a section that's not available, but the rest of this area is available for use.
Okay, I think Commissioner Stylin may have brought up a point last time about lighting in the front. Do we still feel we have sufficient lighting? I know I brought something up about lighting in the patio area, but weren't we talking about possibly putting a light in the front somewhere?
Well, my concern last time was that there is a outside exterior light on the front side of the building, right on that final pillar right there. And on your proposed drawing, that light seems to have disappeared. And I think that light would go a long way to lighting up the tables and stuff outside. I don't know if it was removed accidentally
No,
or...
We took it off because sitting on that monolith piece, though the lights that match the building just looked out of place. But if you'll notice on the plan that we've presented to you, that we're proposing a couple light bollards in that landscape area up front. So that would throw some light on the sidewalk and on the front area of the building where the seating area is.
Oh, I thought there wasn't going to be any bollards in the landscape area.
That's what we're proposing this one.
That's what you're proposing.
Yeah, I didn't see them on the plan. Are they in there somewhere?
Yeah, there's a note there. It's
It's a
a
note.
proposed landscape area with light
Oh, yeah, I
bollards.
do see, okay. Andrew, do you think that would provide enough illumination?
The staff concern on this one was just sort of consistency of appearance. I did not feel that there was a need to provide much light in this area. There's parking lot lighting and some wall-mounted lighting, and it's primarily a pre-dark use. I didn't have a major concern with it, so I think whatever the commission thinks in terms of aesthetics and lighting would be fine.
And why didn't you want to put it on the building? Because you thought it would interfere with?
Well, we're only taking off the one light on the corner that faces west. The one to the north, we're just moving it over a little bit. So that one that's on the corner facing west, we took it off because the style of light that's on the existing building itself would just look out of place if we slapped it on the hardy board monolith that we're building. So in taking that fixture off, and then we didn't want to add a random extra fixture that didn't go in tune with the rest of the building. So we felt that we can add landscape lighting and bollard lighting, just in front of the building and pick up a difference of lighting there. And as Andrew said as well, there's parking lot lighting, there's all kinds of lights in front of that building as it is. This is more of an accent light that we're supplementing with two bollards in lieu of the one on the building that we're taking off.
One more.
Commissioner Johnson.
I'll wait till they're paying attention.
Okay. That's true.
Last time you were here, we talked about the hardy board going all the way to ground level, and you said it probably wouldn't.
No, it wouldn't. It would be off the ground 4 to 6 inches.
Because it looks like on this drawing, it's still
That's a rendition.
going all the way down.
Yes, the rendering for just color, there will be a base to it that's not hardy board.
Okay.
And as requested, we're going to go with the thicker hardy board.
Do we need to make a note of that, Andrew, just to?
Commissioner Powers?
Just one more thing about the curbing on the north side of the drive-through. You're gonna put a solid curb in there, right? You're not gonna take like the car stops that are there now and then just like back them up on the other side of the north side of the drive-through lane and make that like a temporary area. Your intent is to put a solid curb in there, is that right?
Correct, yes.
Okay, that's it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I have nothing else. Anyone else?
No.
Mr. Jennings, I think we have some conditions.
I have, what I'd like to do first, is go through, there are a handful of conditions that the plans that were revised seem to make obsolete. So I'd like to go through those first and then see what we end up with the other conditions.
Okay.
The first of those was that the petitioner add an aluminum railing similar to the railing used at the adjacent restaurant to define the patio area and separate the crosswalk from the edge of the building. That is now on the plans. Number 2 was the petitioner add a stop sign or watch for pedestrian sign at the drive-through exit. That is also now on the plans. The 4th condition was the rear parking lot that is traversed by drive-through lane shall be signed for employee parking only. That is now also on the plan. And the 5th condition was that an additional directional sign shall be added north of the drive-through to direct customers to enter the drive-through lane from the south. That is also on the plan. So those 4 things are on the plans. If it's okay with the commission, we can remove those and I can go on to the other conditions.
Yes.
Okay, the other conditions, that an easement for the drive-through lane, which is located partially on the adjacent property, shall be provided prior to issuance of the final certificate of occupancy. That one is still relevant. What used to be the 6th condition would now be number 2. That pavement markings, the pavement markings for the drive-through lane shall be extended to the south. Hang on one second, I'm just cleaning this up a little bit as I go. The number 7, which is now 3rd, landscaping in the patio shall match the theme of the adjacent landscaping to the south of the subject unit. The next one, the sidewalk next to the drive-through is to be installed within 1 year of approval if building B is not yet constructed.
1 year?
1 year.
6 months. I think 6 months if we don't have a plan.
6 months from their occupancy? or-
Yeah, from their occupancy.
Occupancy.
Yeah. Something to the effect that it's got to, I mean, somebody can have a plan and say, I got a plan, but it's got to come before. How can we word it that has to be approved by us? I think 1 year is too long.
Okay, I have it as now sidewalk. If the sidewalk next to the drive-through is installed within 6 months of occupancy, if building B is not yet constructed.
Yes.
The next one, I don't know if I heard a consensus on it, that the petitioner shall install signage directing pedestrians to the existing south crosswalk.
Yes.
And the next one, that the petitioner use a 5/8 inch hardy panel and provide a base of 4 to 6 inches at ground level.
Yes.
And the last one, that the frequency of trash pickup shall be increased if the current schedule is found to be inadequate.
Yes.
So that is everything on the special use docket.
Great. So do I hear a motion for docket number 2014-14, special use site plan approval for a drive-through restaurant?
So moved.
Second.
A motion by Commissioner Johnson, second by Commissioner Powers. Mr. Secretary.
Commissioner Johnson says yes. Commissioner Powers?
Yes.
Commissioner Dorband?
Yes.
Commissioner Stylin?
No.
Commissioner Vito?
Yes.
Commissioner Zangara?
Yes.
And Chairman Raffato?
Yes.
1 no.
And Andrew, I didn't hear, but you did cover that orange awnings were okay, acceptable?
They're on the plan as that, so I did not.
Perfect, thank you.
And Commissioner Steinle, your reason for voting no?
Just because I am for condition number 2 and the location of the sidewalk that no longer exists.
Great, thank you. Do I hear a motion for SCBA 14?
Just to,
Okay.
before that motion's
Nope,
made,
that's
there's a condition of approval on it that is in the staff report. Let me find the wording of that real quick. Excuse me while I open that. It was, let me see if I can get it fast enough.
Oh, yes, they were supposed to change the size.
Okay. This, of course, is without moving the sign or adding a sign to the rear. You would have to, if you decide that you'd like to pursue that, you'd have to come back for a specific change for that. As it's written, though, that the sign shall be individually illuminated as noted on the elevation plan dated August 25th, removing all reference to cloud signs on the final set for permit issuance. That was the condition of approval.
Go ahead, Commissioner Johnson.
Andrew, last week we also talked about the one sign perhaps being too large on the north side. Has that been revised?
The question was, I believe, that it might have some additional area that they were not taking advantage of. That would be the north side sign. I think that sign, at this point, it seems likely that you're going to investigate whether you might want to relocate it. So my suggestion would be that if it is also being relocated, they can look at the size option at that point.
Okay.
Andrew, so to put the little sign in the back, we'd have to come back?
Yes. We would need some sort of, some drawing to illustrate what type of sign it is, where it's going to be placed, and what size it is. And I can get you the section of the code that talks about the size limitation. Just to do a variation of one of these signs that's a little bit, whether it's the cup on top or the cup side by side, you probably have to shrink it down a bit.
Ready? So do I hear a motion for SCBA 14-26, appearance approval of wall and freestanding signs?
So moved.
Second.
A motion by
Commissioner Vito?
Commissioner Vito, second by Commissioner Stylin. Mr. Secretary.
Commissioner Vito?
Yes.
Commissioner Stylen?
Yes.
Commissioner Dorband?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson is yes. Commissioner Powers?
Yes.
Commissioner Zangara?
Yes.
And Chairman Rafado.
Yes. Motion to close.
So moved?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
When will
Thanks for
you,
being pro-business.
when will you be
Don't see
open?
too much of that in the North Shore.
When will you be open?
Before the end of the year, we'll try.
Great.
All
Good
right.
luck.
Thanks.
And they're open 24 hours a day, so once they open, they're there forever.
There are forever. No locks on the door. You'll have something to sign. Sure. We'll take a quick five. I don't know the difference between a quick five and a slow five, but we're going to do a five. Calling docket number 2014-15, the Whitley 150 West Dundee Road, concept review of an assisted living facility, planned unit development. Mr. Jennings?
Thank you. Before we have the petitioner come up, there are a couple of things that I wanted to just note on this project. The village board recently reviewed the concept plan for this planned unit development, which would be located to the east of the synagogue across the street over here on Dundee Road. The plan at this time is still under concept review. The petitioner, as you'll hear tonight, is requesting that when this item comes back as a formal hearing, that the Plan Commission consider the plan as a final PUD plan. The documentation for the final PUD is being prepared at this time. So there are a handful of items that we've asked the petitioner to cover through the presentation. If they don't, we'll make sure that we ask those questions as a staff at the end, just to go through the checklist of some of our concerns. But with that, I'd like to go ahead and open this up to the petitioner.
And before we do that, so what you're saying is we'll go from a concept to a final?
Not exactly. So what we would do procedurally, we'd go from concept to the preliminary. The preliminary, rather than having the gap between preliminary and final, would be simultaneous. The code requires republication of a public hearing for a PUD between preliminary and final if there's a gap of more than 6 months. In this case, they would be requesting simultaneously the preliminary and the final, essentially a waiver of preliminary and approval of final at the same time. So we would still publish the public hearing as normal for the PUD. We typically publish the preliminary PUD. In this case, we don't require publication of a final PUD if it comes quickly enough. And what we would be entertaining, if it were at the discretion, of course, of the commission, would be the package that is being submitted. We would evaluate for the requirements of each, requirements of preliminary and the requirements of the final.
Is that a decision that has to be made tonight?
I think that there could be some direction given to the petitioner. From a staff perspective, if they've met all of the requirements for a final PUD, we could, of course, review it as such. To this point, just as an aside, the property has some significant floodplain constraints on it, which has caused the developer to do some significant engineering work, which is somewhat unusual for a concept PUD. So they have had, to date, a need to do some fairly thorough investigation of the site that is more advanced than your typical concept PUD.
I guess the first thing that comes to mind with my concern is, for instance, with Northgate, we had a preliminary, and then it was a long time before we had a final, and that concerns me. And for us to have to make that decision tonight, I'll poll the commission after we're done, but I just have a concern with that.
I think my opinion of this, and Ms. Maluzzi, if you have anything else on it, feel free to chime in. I think my opinion on this is if you can provide them direction of what the expectation is, if they are going to ask that this item be considered for simultaneous preliminary and final approval, set forth the expectations for that submittal. If there's anything in particular that would be a minimum requirement that you'd like to express to them, this would be a good time to do that. You, of course, on receipt of that submittal, could elect not to waive that preliminary as being requested. But if you do have, if you have particular expectations that you'd like to convey, you could certainly share that with them.
Okay. Is there any questions about that before we get into the discussion of this docket? No? Okay, great.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
As an employee of the synagogue involved in this project, I will be abstaining from any conversation on this.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Am I on? You're on, but you may need to actually pick it up. I'm not sure if it can get you from 2 feet
Has to be
away.
closer?
I think you may have to pick it up and hold it.
I apologize, I have a little trouble standing for any length of time, so this is a little accommodation here.
Sure.
Thank you. And just a comment about the procedural things. It isn't necessary for us to skip a step. It's just that we've come so far in developing the plan that there won't be much difference between what we will show you tonight and what we would show you at a final meeting, which is really all we were trying to say here, I think.
Understood.
The LaSalle Group is a developer in this case, but the LaSalle Group is both developer, has a building arm, and an operator that has been a family-owned business now for 19 years or so. The business has been focused in the last few years on providing care for folks with Alzheimer's and dementia. Memory care is basically how we...
If I could interrupt you for 1 second.
Sure.
Could you please give your name and business address into the microphone so our recording secretary can have
I
it?
apologize.
Oh,
My
that's
name is
quite all right.
Stephen Meacher, and I'm a senior advisor for the LaSalle Group.
Great, thank you.
Meacher.
Thank you.
And although our business has been focused on this memory care business, we also have regular assisted living and we have independent senior living that we've developed in the past. The chief thing that we like to tell people is that this is a family business. They own these properties. They have no intention of selling them, and we're in it for the long haul. We like to think that we're a good neighbor. We have a quiet use, and we try to have an attractive building, and we hope to make that demonstration for you today. The business is actually located in Dallas. However, we're in the Chicagoland area. We have 10 properties here already, and the nearest ones to you would probably be Vernon Hills, and then we are just starting construction in Arlington Heights. We also have 19 properties in Texas and 5 in Atlanta, and we're opening up in Florida and Washington, D.C. It's a controlled growth, but we're happy to see that somebody's going to try to address the needs for this particular group of people. The demand that we have found in this area in particular is very high for what we do. And we think that we're one of the best at doing this, of course. And I think that for us anyway, as a group, we're trying to come up with the best solution for our business, but also to fit with the community, because we have to be accepted by the community if we're going to have residents who come join us. I'd like to give you just an overview of the project. It's in your materials. And then have my architect, the engineers, tell you something about the details. Then I'll come back and try to handle some of these sticky little detail things that require either are addressing an issue that we've heard about or trying to overcome a problem we have with the site. But very quickly, this site is going to be an assemblage of 2 properties, and we're intending to put approximately 100 units. So it'll be 96 to 100 units on this property. 32 to 34 of them will be memory care, 64 to 66 regular assisted living. That range is there because we have some double occupancy rooms. We don't know how they're going to lease at this point, so it gives us a little flexibility. It is a single building. There is a central core that is the common areas for our assisted living building, and then a 3-story building behind with 2 open wings that will have on the ground floor our memory care units, and on the 2 upper floors, regular assisted living. The most interesting thing about this property for your consideration is going to be the way that we have to handle the land itself. there's a summary of the transactions in your materials, but it's going to work like this. We are acquiring part of the land in front here. It's going to be the west side of the building, but we're going to acquire that property from Shir Hadash Synagogue. In addition, we're buying all of the property on the eastern side, and we're going to end up subdividing that so that we can keep just the property on the front for ourselves. All of the property on the back will go to Shir Hadash for their use. So as you're considering our use, you're looking at a PUD for the front portion of this site. It has about 700 feet of frontage, and it contains about 4.76 acres total. After all of the land transfers, you'll find in our development, we have normal landscaping, things to talk to you about in terms of how we do our planning for the outsides of the building. You'll hear about our materials. You'll also see in our plans some of the things that you see here, improvements that are, at this point, just discussion with the synagogue. We've talked about a community garden. We've talked about an area for activities, a temporary tent for special activities. There's a bike trail proposed through the back of this along the creek. And the whole area is really thought of as a park in my way of thinking of it. We've offered to share some of the cost of doing the improvements on the property in the rear, but I don't want you to consider those things that are beyond our parking lot at the rear to be part of what we're proposing or having you look at tonight. One of the things that has come up in our discussion with staff has to do with the long-term maintenance of things. And the long-term maintenance is very simple. The owners of the property will take care of their own land. We'll take care of all the land on which our improvements are, and the synagogue is responsible for theirs. There's no implication here that we would have any responsibility for maintaining any of these improvements that might go on the Shir Hadash land, except it might be warranty if they ask us to do any of the construction. There are going to be some reciprocal use and maintenance agreements between us, however. The principal drive for the property will be on the western side, and it presently exists as the access for the synagogue. We are going to have a shared use and maintenance agreement with the synagogue, and it provides our primary access into the property in both directions. At the eastern end of the property, we also have an entrance. Right now, it's shown as both a right in and also a left turn coming out across Dundee Road. When we get to some details, that's what I want to talk with you about. I had to go left as I was going east on Dundee at 6 o'clock, so. For us, there will not be a whole lot of regular easements that we have to deal with. There is an easement along the western side of the property that connects to the bridge crossing over to the school site, and that'll remain. There are some things we're going to do to make sure people don't think that's part of our driveway. One of the biggest issues we have is with the flood potential for this site. There is a floodway that passes through the property, and we'll have an opportunity to show you more details, but it's depicted on this red line. The key thing for you to notice here is that we're not going to put any of the building in the floodway. There will be some parking in part of our rear drive in the floodway, but it won't impede flood, and it's permissible. The property also, however, has a dividing line. I guess it's a flood elevation line for the 100-year floodplain. Not shown on any of your exhibits here, but it's shown up on our survey that roughly bisects the property north to south. It is a 1-foot elevation change across the property that puts us on the eastern end in this 100-year floodplain, and on the western, we're out of that floodplain. We are proposing to do a conditional letter of map amendment so that we can bring the site up, be a little safer to about 2 feet above what it is presently, closer to the elevation of the road at Dundee. That LOMA that will result after we've finished these improvements will be part of the things that we have to talk about as a group because it affects our stormwater, and that'll be one of the detailed things that we cover. Our plan at this point is to handle our stormwater in a rather unusual way for us. There is no room on the site for us to create our normal ponds. We've racked our brains trying to figure out how to put it underground, and it's not feasible. We are going to propose to the village board that we be allowed to discharge into the creek, and then both our detention and, help me here just a second.
Compensatory storage.
Yes, I'm not used to that one. Would be handled in the cities, or the village's pond, as a concession to us to be able to get this development to work, and also so that we wouldn't have to make an approach to the village to use TIF funds to help us with off-site storage. The project really only requires us to handle the stormwater issue. It's the only real thing that we're going to ask from the village, except with the planning commission, the plan commission. We do have to talk a little bit about setbacks, and we'll do that in a little bit more detail in a moment. We've looked at utilities, we've looked in detail at the project, have heard concerns voiced about parking. One of the things that we've had to wrestle with in trying to fit this project into the village is that our use, assisted living, is not defined in the code. We're multifamily, we're commercial, and that varies as we go around the country. So trying to fit or to make sure that we fit the rules for building at this location, we've come across a problem where there isn't any rule for the parking for this kind of a use. We've tried to help there by having our architects go to national experience. They have a lot of experience in this area, and they've identified a need for 60 parking spaces. We've done our own analysis, which is based upon a maximum of 26 people during our first and second shift, an average of 2 people at a time as visitors. Everybody thinks they're going to visit mom every night, but they don't. And then our residents, and our memory care residents do not drive. And our assisted living residents are different than the residents that were pictured 20 years ago in the brochure. We do not have or don't expect our residents to be young and active and coming and going all the time. Our residents will typically be in their mid to late 80s. They'll have issues that we handle very well, but mobility being one of them, and anxiety about driving in the kind of traffic that you have. So we've estimated that we only need about 33 parking spaces for our 66 assisted living residents. It's a different standard that the architects are using, but we both come up with a number between 60 and 61. At this point, there's an error on the write-up we gave you. There are more parking spaces than I indicated here on the write-up, and I'm going to have to refer to 96, I think I corrected it. It's 96 regular parking spaces, plus we have room for an additional 5 in what we call just the space at the back of the building there. So we have plenty of parking, but I just wanted to identify how we came about determining what the parking would need, what parking we would need. And that's really all I had on the little preliminary comments. I'd like you to see something about our project and then come back and visit some more of the sticky little issues that we have to solve.
Great. Thank you.
can pull that over. Pull that over, okay. All right, hello, everybody. Thank you for your time tonight. My name is Jim Moyer. I'm a partner at SAS Architects and Planners, and we're located just down the road. We're in Northbrook, 630 Dundee Road,
Can you spell your last name, please?
Moyer.
Thank you.
Nice, easy one. We're a medium-sized firm, and we primarily do senior care facilities. So we've been fortunate enough to work with Steve over the last 8 years, and I think we've worked on all the autumn leaves projects. There's been about 8 of them in the Chicagoland area. In fact, the team that we have here tonight have been working on those. Nick Patera with Tesca and Tom McCabe with Spaceco is a team that we have, and who's been involved in autumn leaves. So I'd like to just quickly describe this building architecturally, and I'd like to start with the site plan, so it's good that this slide is up. As Steve mentioned, we have a floodway that's going through the middle of the site, so it makes this site kind of challenging to build a building on. So north of that floodway towards the creek, we really couldn't alter the elevations or build any structure whatsoever. It's just part of the Army Corps of regulations for not allowing that. So a building that we've been developing with LaSalle Partners as the assisted living memory support was modified for the site, and I think it worked out well for this. The building itself is a 3-story building. The upper 2 floors are assisted living with 64 units, 64 apartments. The first floor is memory support. There's 2 neighborhoods of 15 units. There's a 1-story element that's the assisted living commons area. There's really 2 access points to the site. The one on the east will be dedicated to this property. The one on the west will be shared. We have a loop road that goes around the building, and it also provides the parking necessary for the building. And like Steve mentioned, we, based on our experience with similar projects, we did our calculations, and we based it on the number of beds. So I think we have 102 beds, and we provided 1 space for every 3 cars, and that's loosely what's in your zoning code, I think, for a nursing home. Most of the residents here are going to be in their upper 80s and really don't drive, or if they do, they bring a car, but then they don't drive it, and it eventually gets sold. So we did that calculation. We came up to roughly the same number, about 60 spaces. That also includes 1 space for every employee, and there's 26 employees at a maximum shift. So we came up with 60 spaces, and we actually have 96 spaces. The spaces to the south will be primarily for visitors and any residents that would have a car for the assisted living. The spaces to the northeast, I don't know if I have control over the mouse. You do? I do? Okay. The spaces up at the northeast would be primarily employee parking. And then the spaces to the northwest would be visitor spaces for memory support and overflow parking on holidays, and then also shared parking with the synagogue. The main entrance to the building for the assisted living faces Dundee Road. There's also another entrance for the memory support at the north portion of the building. The service, there's a generator located in this area that we always make part of these buildings to provide power in case of emergency if our power goes down. There's a service drive in the north, and there was a couple design considerations for putting that service drive there. The first consideration is we hope it's not going to flood, but the potential is that that's a floodway, it's going to flood. So any type of emergency services or exits, we really tried to keep to the south portion of the building, so the stairs that are coming down from the top are exiting to the south, and then to keep the building services coming to the building that was located on the south. And then another factor was the northern portion of the first floor is the memory support neighborhood, and we really wanted that to be a secured environment, and we didn't want to create a service that would cross that secured memory support unit that could potentially leave doors open where somebody could leave the building. It's just a security kind of factor. And we typically like to put memory support on the first floor because it's very important for memory support residents to be able to get out, nature on nice days, to get outside, and we don't want to have to take them through the building and down elevators, so we really locate them right off that outside area, right off of that secured area. There's a couple patios for the assisted living one for the dining room and one for the living room. So there's some nice outdoor space for the assisted living residents. If I could go to the first floor. So just quickly, the first floor, this is the main entrance, and then what you come into first is some administrative offices in the front, and then kind of just a nice open area that houses the main dining room and then some activity area. There's a little bistro area that they can get coffee and breakfast in the morning. There's a library and a secondary access into the memory support, some public washrooms, the mailroom, and then the elevators that take you up to the second and third floor apartments. There's also kind of back of house service area with the main kitchen, staff lounge, some housekeeping, receiving, electrical rooms. And then the whole northern portion of the first floor is the memory support, and it's a secured unit. They have their own dining rooms, activity rooms, greenhouse, bathing areas, nurses area, medication area. So it's really a self-contained unit. And then just off of each one of these neighborhoods is a secured garden, which they have access to off of the living room, dining room. So if I could go to the second floor. So the second and third floor are pretty typical floors. There's 32 apartments on each floor, primarily one-bedroom apartments, but there's also a two-bedroom and some studios. There's some common space kind of in the center core area. There is a resident laundry room where they would do their own laundry, some back-of-house service areas, and then there's this common space on the second and third floor. On the second floor, this would be a doctor's office and a small physical therapy with some exercise equipment and a library. Really hasn't been finished yet, but that's the direction we're going. And then on the third floor, we would have, it would be a multi-purpose area for lectures or movie nights or card rooms. So it's just a multi-purpose space on the third floor. This floor is also broken into a couple areas. We put a 1 hour smoke compartment just for an added measure of safety, nothing required by code, but it's something we typically do where if one area is on fire, which, you know, we've got full sprinklers, so it shouldn't happen, but we have that extra added safety that we could move residents from one side to the other. The mechanicals for this will primarily be above the core, above the elevators on the roof, and they will be screened by the roof that's on the building. So if I could go to the conceptual elevation. What's in it? The elevation? The elevation. It's coming. So this this is a conceptual elevation, and one of the things we were really sensitive about is we didn't want to put a three-story building parallel to Dundee Road. We really wanted to have that recede back. So it's hard to see on this, but in the plan you can see that the three-story is closer at the corners and then recedes back, and then we have a one-story mass that really softens that three stories. So we're very careful to give it a nice massing from the road. In terms of the character, after working with Steve and I think some comments from the village, we were going towards a prairie school that I think is a good style for this to give it a more residential feel, and also to make it feel like not such a large building. It really kind of brings the building down and makes it more horizontal. So you can see the three-story building beyond, and we have a lot of horizontal banding that makes the building horizontal. We've also added some bays so that we don't have such flat wings that provide some nice shade and shadow. We have a low-pitched roof with large overhangs, and then we have a stone base and brick walls. And keeping with the prairie style, we also have broken up the third floor accent to give it some accents, and that material would be a stucco or actually we were talking about this today, a cement fiber that might even be like a siding that'll give it a little bit more residential character. If we go on to some slides, I have brought some materials to kind of give you examples of what the materials would be, and I actually have the samples here as well. So at the base of the building, we're trying to
in keeping with the Prairie School, keeping it very kind of warm, earth tone, natural materials. On the base, we would have about 30 inches high, would have a stone base. Something similar to this. Obviously, all the materials haven't been picked out. And then above that, and that's the majority of the wall surface, would be a warm brick, kind of in reds and orange. That would be similar to that. And that's really the majority of the material on the building.
Mr. Murray, while you're on that one, the size noted here is the utility size. Roughly, what's the size difference between the brick that we're seeing and these?
So these, there's 3 bricks to 8 inches on this size, and utility, there's typically 2 bricks. So 1 brick would be, so it'd be 2 instead of 3.
Okay.
It's a little bit larger.
Thank you.
And I think on a larger building, that helps really bring the scale of the building down a little bit, because if you have a lot of grout lines, it tends to make the building feel a little bit larger. And then at the 3rd floor accents, we were going with a kind of a tan material, a stucco material, or again, that could be the cement fiber siding. And then the horizontal bands and the sills would be a warm buff, natural tan color. So that would go together well with the stone and the brick. The next slide. And then really all the fascias and the windows on the storefronts, we didn't want to go with a stark white, so this is more of a beige color that really blends the materials together, picks up on the stone color. And then next slide. So the roofing would be asphalt, fiberglass asphalt shingles, and it would be a gray brown color, kind of an aged cedar material. And then at the 1st floor, just to give it a little excitement or interest, we were going with a standing seam metal roof in a soft green, kind of an aged copper color. And then we have some paving accents in front of the main entrance. And then for parking lot lighting, we'd really like to just be a neutral light that's not going to stand out, that's going to provide just light down and not out or up, so we don't have any glare inside of the apartments. The color would be a dark bronze. So I brought some examples of some similar projects. The first one is the typical autumn leaves. This is a 1-story building that we've built throughout Chicago. It's very similar. It's got a stone base, brick walls, and asphalt shingles. It's a nice building. So these are about 44 bed, 1-story. These are the buildings that we've been building with Steve. The next slide is a building that's very similar in scale that we're doing in Pleasant Prairie, Wisconsin. The upper floors are assisted living, and the lower level is memory support, and the number of units is pretty much identical. So this is a project or a mix that we're seeing a lot of right now. This is the North Shore Place, which I think the first resident moved in last week up in Northbrook. This is a little bit larger, but it's a 5-story assisted living. 2nd floor is all memory care. And Brighton Gardens, we did the majority of Brighton Gardens in the Chicagoland area. Again, this is a very similar project, 3 stories. Upper floors are assisted living, 1st floor memory support. This is more of Georgian, but it's all brick with asphalt shingles. And just the last project is one that's just we're completing up. That's kind of interesting, one of the first in Illinois. It's a skilled nursing that's more of a residential concept, less institutional. So the smaller cottages only have 12 residents, and they're surrounded by a living room concept, and then the larger one has 24 units, so it's a smaller density, more residential. So that's another project that's similar in scale we're working on right now.
Can I just go back one moment to the elevation drawing you had? The accent material, right now, the concept is for either a thin stucco or perhaps a
A cement siding like a Hardy, James Hardy.
And that material you're looking at, sorry, I went too far.
Yeah, it's on the third.
In these areas?
Right, correct.
between-
Right. We really wanted to be able to define the bays and also in Prairie School architecture to help define the horizontals. The upper story is typically a different material.
So between the bays that stick out?
Between the roof and between the bays,
Okay.
to help define the bays.
Any idea, if you were to propose a cement fiberboard, is there any idea at this point as to what type of arrangement you're looking for, a horizontal siding or a?
It would,
Yes, a lap siding.
this would be horizontal. We'd want to keep that horizontal emphasis on the building.
Okay, sorry to interrupt, go ahead.
Sure. So I'd like to turn it over to Nick Matera, the landscape architect, and he can walk us through the landscape architecture on the building.
Let me back up for the, there you go.
Thank you. My name's Nick Patera, P-A-T-E-R-A. My company's Tesco Associates. We're located in Evanston, Illinois. We've been working together with the architecture, with the engineering, and this is a conceptual plan at this point, but it's showing a little bit of a commitment to what are the landscape emphasis to situate this building and give it a nice base in the surrounding. Some of the things that I think were important for us to recognize is that we really do have, as Mr. Meacher said, almost a park-like environment on the backside to the north along Buffalo Creek and to the east of us along the bike trail that offers ourselves and our residents very nice views, and it will remain similar to what you see with openness and a little bit of a relief. I think that the counterpart to the openness is that what are we doing with the area around the building, the area around the parking, and the view from Dundee Road. And I think that some of the things that we've looked carefully at are very much along the parkway of Dundee Road and trying to get a landscape screening element with a tall hedge. We do have power poles along Dundee. For those who travel this on a frequent basis, you know we have wires, so we're going to have to work together with the utility company to make sure. But what you're seeing along here is a tall screen type hedge that's about hood height to block headlights, to block cars that would be parked in there. If we can get ornamental scale trees that work with the utility company, things like a salt-tolerant tree lilac, something that won't get enormous and withstand the salt and the urban condition and not get up into the power lines, then I think we're able to get some more vertical elements in this strip. We've got about this is good. We've got about a 8 or 10 foot wide strip between the sidewalk and the hedge, but the hedge is supposed to be balanced on both sides. There's an intentional opening. I mistakenly switched, but I'm going to stay with this, I guess. There's an intentional opening so that we can recognize the front door and kind of the forecourt of the arrival. There's a water feature fountain that you might have seen on one of the autumn leaves. It's somewhat of a signature element for LaSalle Group to have annual plantings that are replenished on a regular basis around the front fountain. The other area was of concern was a 4-foot landscape berm that will be going along the front of this. So we really have a consistent foreground of landscape that wraps around, and by the way, tucked in will be a loading area, and so we can end up providing our services, but it will be behind a vertical wall that's another 4 feet. So actually the wall would be about exposed 4 feet above a 4-foot landform. On the inside of it, you have about an 8-foot high wall, but it only looks like a 4-foot wall with a 4-foot berm planted with a double layer evergreen, vertical, and shrubs here. So I'm spending time talking about kind of how do we fix some of the more functional elements, parking, the view from Dundee Road, services, and loading. If can we click back one? Once resolved with that, the end pieces of the building at the end wings, and Jim had done a nice job explaining how the building sets back, but the 3-story elements have a greenhouse at the east end and a relaxation and a social room on the west end. These elements do have vertical landscape, evergreens, shade trees, and then around the entire perimeter of the building, there's a foundation planting of shrubs with a lawn in the foreground. So this is really a fully landscaped, almost in a residential character, to complement the architecture. As we go forward with further definition of the landscape plan and get into final submittal, there will be specific landscape plantings, size, species that are married and matched up with the architectural elevations where the architecture has windows and facades and bays. Then we would complement those patterns with our landscape. In the rear garden areas, then for this would be a see-through metal fence for the secured garden, and there would be walkways and some activity, whether it's seating areas, but some general accommodations will be made for the memory care residents that would come out of the north. The nice thing about the locations of 1, 2, 3, and 4 gardens is that there's different exposures. So if it's a hot summer day and you want to sit on the north side and stay cool, you're going to come over to this garden. If you're really looking for a morning sky and sunrise, you're going to come over to the northeast side, and so on. So I think that the 4 corner gardens kind of tucked in close to the building, not far from doors and access and from support, are really going to be used and useful. The other drawing, if I click into it one more time, please, does have, and this is pretty faint to see, at least on the big screen, maybe your small ones, but there are sidewalks that will allow you to get to the front door. If you've been dropped off, you have easy access into the front foyer. And then from the parking and the front sidewalk will then, continue on. And likewise, if I do find that I'm going to be on Dundee Road, whether I've walked or ridden a bike, there is a very generous way to come in and welcome people who are not bringing in by car. And likewise, the bike path over on the west side has a connection to that as well. So we're not exclusively car bound if people can find a way to come here and say that they've lived across the creek and they're coming to visit a friend, a neighbor, a loved one. There are other ways besides just cars by themselves. That's in general where we are with landscape as a concept at this point. Thank you.
Good evening, my name is Tom McCabe. I'm with Spaceco Incorporated. We're the civil engineers. We're in Rosemont, Illinois. MCC ABE.
Mr. McCabe, I put the geometric plan in. The utility plan didn't show up too well at this, so you have just pretty much this and the site plan to work off of.
Okay, that'll be enough. As was mentioned before, about half the site is in the floodplain in the front, and the floodway line, I think you all saw that. That's, I got this thing. Oop. What am I doing?
Which one are you looking for?
I was just looking for that, just for the arrow. What you had was good.
Okay. Let me go back up then.
Yeah. That's
If you
good.
shake it, your arrow will pop up. There you go.
Okay, so right along here is the floodway line that comes around, and as I think you all know in town, you can't do any work, you can't build anything up in the floodway, you can cut it down. The parking lots can be in the floodway as long as they're less than a foot below the base flood elevation. The interesting thing about this site is that almost the entire floodway area from on the west half is actually above the base flood elevation, even though it's considered floodway. And we all know how floodway works with the FEMA. So even though we're showing no construction, no buildings in the floodway, no fill in the floodway, the fact is if you were to go out there at that floodway line, you wouldn't see all of a sudden a drop and you're down into the creek. So our building is set back. We have to be 2 feet, the finished floor has to be 2 feet above the base flood elevation. So in the back of the building, We have, our building is about 5 or 6 feet from the floodway, and then we have stairs going down to that memory care drop-off, and then it'll be ramps on the sides. So we're about as efficient as we can get. I know Steve had mentioned one of the restrictions we have in the front is, and you can see that parking lot, how the road, the property line is not quite running east and west. So at the east side, we're only 5 feet from the parking lot to the property line. And the west side, I think we're about 15 feet. So as you can see, what we've done is we've gone 5 feet off the property line at the pinch point in the front, and then we're 5 feet off the floodway line, which is in essence our pinch point in the back. So we're about as tight as we can get this and still be functional. As far as the detention, we are going to be, as Stephen mentioned, we're at about 4.6 or 4.7 acres, which means we are underneath the requirements for the MWRD to provide detention. They're 5 acres and greater. So we're actually exempt from the MWRD's detention requirements. I know the village has detention requirements for parcels such as this. The two issues that we have are, we ran the detention calculations based on the village requirements. We came with about 0.8, it was 0.78 acre feet. The amount of area that we're filling in the floodplain in the front is about 0.3 or 0.4 acres. So if you take the 110%, we're going to come up with about 1.2 acre feet of detention / compensatory storage that we can't provide on the property. In dealing with village staff over time, there's that new area, the reservoir on the south side of Dundee Road that I think has about 35 acre feet of additional storage, and I think a lot of that was based on the future development of the north side of Dundee Road. If you were to take a pro rata share, if you went down Dundee Road with all the properties, it did a pro rata share of what each property would be entitled to, I think it's quite a bit more than what we're asking for. So, and again, I think that's the reason when we've seen plans before for this property and nothing has ever materialized. So I think with the timing of the reservoir across the street and the fact that we can keep everything with a 3-story building, we can keep everything south of the floodway. I think this is something it can work. So we met with Andrew and staff, went with the fire department. There's nothing magical here. You know, we're going to loop water main around the back, come in, fire hydrants every 300 feet. You know, water service, it's sprinkled. Sanitary sewers out in Dundee Road. We're coming in the front with the sanitary sewer. The storm, both front and rear parking lots would have storm sewer in them. They would tie in at the low area actually is out in this area. So we would tie the storm sewers from the back parking lot and the front parking lot timed together here. And then we would have a discharge probably in this area. So we had a long enough kind of a meandering swale with probably native plantings in that for to keep the water clean. So we're not just dumping parking lot soil sediment, that type of stuff right into Buffalo Creek. So we'd have on-site, we'd probably do some on-site pretreatment, and then we would discharge the storm water through a grassy swale to help clean the water. Other than that, like I said, it's the floodway and floodplain really were the issues on this property.
I was going to add some details here at the end, but it occurred to me that we've touched on a lot of them. And rather than go through them again, I'll mention them, and we'll elaborate on a couple, but we're prepared to provide more information tonight if that's desired, or, you know, as I said, it's in the write-up. With what we're trying to do right now, the biggest concern that we had to begin with was flood. You've heard how we're trying to address that.
Would you, excuse me, Mr. Meacher, would you mind pulling the microphone a little closer to yourself? I don't know if we're picking you up right now.
I forgot it was there.
Thank you.
So the topics that I can spend more time on are flood, our driveway and curb cuts, and I'd like to take some questions on that. I got my own now. And we would like to volunteer some information about emergency services because it's been mentioned to us in one of our meetings with the staff. There's a concern about the number of 911 calls that our building might generate. And I was hoping to have more detailed information about what we have used in the past in terms of services from communities where we presently operate. I had misunderstood our people who I had heard were keeping a report on the 911 traffic. It turns out that only 2 of them had, and I have that information. But we're going to generate it for all of our properties in our system, and I can provide that information at the final, or our next meeting, our formal meeting. Basically, what it comes down to is that we have in a property that has about 50 residents, we have between 12 and 20 calls a year. And of those 911 calls, one of the things that I wanted to point out is that we have an entrance survey where we bring every resident into a property. It's a very detailed survey. It helps us with their needs, but also helps us with marketing. And we've determined that almost 80% of our residents come from within our sub-market area, which here is largely Wheeling and then just portions of some of the surrounding communities. The actual sub-market will be defined more by driving than by a radius of some 5 or 6 miles. It's more like a 10 to 12 minute drive time. And because of that, we could expect these residents that we'll have to have made the same call were they in their home. The interesting thing about our property is that we have a registered nurse on staff 24 hours a day. That person, along with the care staff, can assess any things that happen on the site and make the call whether or not it's really a 911 call or if we can handle it a different way. When I gave you a count at 12 to 20 runs a year, it's actually going to be less than that for this property because that's for our memory care properties where our residents are more frail and more likely to need the service. We keep our residents through the end of life using hospice on the property. But when there's a death, it's usually a private ambulance. It is not disturbing the neighborhood and it's not going to use the services. One of the other things is that I guess with the way that we look at our residents, I'm sorry, I balked because of the way I have to describe our residents' needs. We are providing assistance, but we provide assistance with the acts of daily living. This is bathing, dressing, eating, handling mobility issues, but we do not provide medical care except to the extent that we do provide medication management. We can handle oxygen use on the site, and we'll take care of injections for, insulin and that sort of thing. If a resident requires more care than that, they can't stay with us. So they will not be candidates for the 911 calls. Obviously, these are individuals that are advanced age, so we will have some calls. When we come back with our formal presentation, I'll have more concrete data from our other properties. The other questions, though, I guess I'd like to just make sure that we're highlighting them, is that we have some issues with the fact that we're not well defined by your code. I've mentioned in my opening remarks, I've mentioned parking. We think we've got a pretty good handle on it. We came up with this independently of our architects, and I think we're on track there. We have some issues with setbacks. We are going to, of course, ask for a PUD approval. On the front of the property, at the west end, we're at what the minimums would be for a front setback for multifamily. It's about 10 feet, as I recall, all the way forward. And then at the other end, on the west end, though, it tapers down to about 5 feet.
You're referring to the parking setback, right?
I said parking, I meant yeah,
The parking
the
setback.
driveway, yeah.
Yes.
Anyway, those improvements should normally set back 10 feet, but we have only 5 feet to give if we leave that 5 feet at the back where we had the floodway. That is one thing that we would like to ask for consideration of a waiver of a requirement in the PUD. We don't need any other waivers that we can see at this point. We do have another question, and that has to do with impact fees, and it may or may not be something we would address here. But again, we're not well defined, and if someone has to determine for us if we're to be considered multifamily or commercial, and like I said, it varies from time to time, from place to place, but our residents won't use those services that you usually collect these impact fees for. Yes, we may have a few people on the road, but they're not using schools, they're not, well, you know the list. Like you to consider that when you think about how we should be defined, and I don't know how to bring that to anybody's attention, so I'll leave that to Mr. Jenkins.
Just while you're on that, if you just submit a description of the operation in writing for our staff and our attorneys to look at, we'll compare it to what is in the impact fee section of our code. As you said, that impact fee section is written for residential, and we'll have to make a determination to what extent this is a residential structure versus a commercial structure. If you could provide detail as to how the memory care, what portion is memory care, what portion is not, are the units separate, are the units open, and, you know, just some description of each wing of the building and how it operates.
Okay.
So that we can have enough information to make that determination for you.
And I'm going to say, without consulting with my architects, that I think we have to make that eastern entrance say right in, right out. I don't see any reason to even try to get traffic across Dundee there. So that will be changed on our final submission. And that would leave us, you know, I've got a lot of data that I can answer questions.
What I think would be appropriate at this time, if you have nothing else in terms of presentation, I think the Planning Commission, if you'd like to go down the line and ask some questions, we can get some questions out. Maybe some can be answered now. Some would be expectation for items for you to cover on your formal submittal.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Zangara.
Thank you. As for, I'll just start with the elevations first. I think the building looks very attractive, fits really nicely. Materials, just, they work. We've had a lot of concerns and everything, and I just really enjoyed seeing the masonry, the stone, the way it fits, seeing the other projects. I think it would be very well. Parking, I saw your calculations. I've dealt with parking myself in many of situations, and I believe you're fine with parking. I have no problems with that at all. My biggest concern, or maybe just recommendations that I would feel, is with these outdoor areas that you have for the assistant living, for all these, there's nothing, in those 4 areas, I see no shade areas. In one of your slides for the pictures that you had, I think it might have been the Arlington Heights one, it looked like you had some kind of shaded area up on that second floor. I just think if they're gonna be sitting outside, you know, sunburn, just shade. I mean, I just think of something, some kind of shade element. And that is leading me to a point of the patio / dining patio. I think landscaping wise, you cover it really well. I thought it was only 4 feet, but I'm correct, that wall's really 8 feet high.
You're right on both cases. We did say 4 feet on the plans. We talked before the meeting and said that we could still have a 4-foot berm, but have a 4-foot wall extend above that berm. So the berm would be up at table height, and then wall above it, but evergreens in front. So it was not clear on the plans, and I think we can still pull it off and have it, have the proximity of the patio and the loading area so that they are
So
close.
the loading area is really, you'll have an 8-foot wall from the loading area.
Right,
Okay.
right. As far as shade, that LaSalle and Autumn Leaves do provide trellises and canopy elements, and good comment, thank you.
And I'll leave with the, I guess my last thing was considering the patio area or dining area with shade. Nice areas. I know we have all these woods here, floodplain. Would there be any consideration of putting one of those areas as a screened-in area?
We had looked at that, and then in our dealings with the synagogue as well, they were looking for that. The problem is you can't have permanent structures in the floodway.
I was talking about the dining area, patio area in the front there.
Oh, yeah, but I don't think that's a problem.
Just because I know, with mosquitoes, with eating out there, with just all those concerns,
Sure.
just a recommendation. My last recommendation, and I could pass this on, is with the brick pavers, especially in the front. I've dealt with this before, snow plowing issues and with the elderly people. Would there be any consideration of using some, I guess, heat elements underneath the paver area by your entrance for less use of salt, plows and stuff like that? That would be a recommendation. I've seen that before, especially with older people. You break up those pavers and, just maintenance-wise. But other than that, that's really all I have, just mostly recommendations.
Thank you. Commissioner Vito.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. You were saying that you're fairly certain most of the residents will come from the village of Wheeling. How do you know that?
Well, it is experience. Remember that I mentioned that we take this detailed survey as the folks come in, and we have a complete record of every resident we've ever received and where they came from. And I didn't say Wheeling, but it happens that Wheeling is the core of that. It will go beyond that by, I'm going to say, a couple of miles, but only because I don't know what the drive times are in all directions. Our other developer has that information, but it will generally be from the community and the surrounding areas that would be within about 10 to 12 minutes drive time.
And you said that you had some experience with Dundee Road and rush hour. I mean, does it concern you at all if you're going to get a call or frequent calls, if they're at that time, that there may be some trouble getting for the emergency vehicles getting to the facility?
I can only report my experience, which was coming from dinner, coming from the west, and the people were all stacked up at the light and allowed room for me to get through. As long as I wasn't getting in the same direction they were going, they were fine with me cutting across.
Okay. In terms of ingress and egress into the parking lot, you said that there'd only be one way in and there'd be right in and right out?
On that eastern end, because it's just one more possible area for accidents. If we concentrate anybody trying to turn left down by where the existing driveway is, we're not changing what has already been approved.
Okay, so you keep the existing driveway the way it is by the synagogue?
Share that with the synagogue.
Okay, and was I right in hearing, I guess what would be the northwest corner where there's kind of part of the park area in the back there, that's going to be shared with the synagogue, that land?
Let me go back over that 1 second. The easiest way to describe this is that we have to define the line between us and the synagogue. That they will end up with all of the property at the rear of our property. And roughly that diagonal line coming up from the west side, it goes from southwest to northeast. That's just running along our parking. We're going to leave a 10-foot buffer there so that we can meet that normal setback. And then it will traverse the property from west to east, roughly straight across, but staying 10 feet off the parking. And it will just, what it does is it leaves a little bit of that undeveloped natural area on our property because the synagogue didn't want to be responsible for tree maintenance and that kind of thing.
So is this black dotted line here, is that the property line of your?
No, it's not a good example. You have in the package, I think it's the page right after the summary. Mr. Jennings.
Right here, this one. Right.
Page 55.
It is the chart that shows, we're looking for the chart that shows the 4 parcels. There it is. Okay, let me describe it this way. The synagogue owns SH Lots 1 and SH Lots 2. The Oshanskis, that we're buying the other land from, own OH Lot 1 and OH Lot 2. We're going to buy all of the Oshanskis' property, and we're going to divide it approximately where that line is that you're seeing, and that's what I was trying to describe, between Lots 1 and 2 there. And that line, as I said, at its nearest point will be about 10 feet off the parking. We will be selling that land to the synagogue for a nominal fee. SH Lot 2 will remain with the synagogue, and we're buying SH Lot 1 from the synagogue. So when we're done, we will combine SH Lot 1 and OH Lot 1, and that will be our property. All of that park-like area, with the exception of maybe a little bit of walking trail, is shown on the property that the synagogue will own. Those plans are not plans we're bringing here to propose what we're doing. That's where we are in the discussions with them because we volunteered to pay for some of those improvements. And we'll benefit by just a friendly use of those properties. There won't be formal agreements. But if our people wanted to walk on their paths, they're not going to have a problem with it.
Okay. Yeah, and I realize that's not up for consideration. I'm just a little worried about the agreement that's there and whether or not that's going to remain amicable and yeah, I'm just a little concerned about it. But all in all, I really like the building. I really like the way it looks. I like the idea. I mean, I have some concerns, but I mean, we all hate Dundee Road pretty much and Wheeling at 5 o'clock. So there's really not much you can do about it. But I think there's been a lot of care and planning gone into this. And
our formal submission to the Planning Commission will not show any of the synagogue's property for consideration of the PUD we're asking for approval.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's all I have.
Commissioner Steinle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Unfortunately, I'm very familiar with the assisted living facilities, having had my parents go through that process, and I want to say your facility really looks nice, both the interiors, the room sizes and designs, and the little kitchenette area. You know, the place where my parents lived, there was a kitchen area, but they didn't really cook anything, right. And it had a little refrigerator.
If I might add the remark, the reason it's there is because it looks like home.
Exactly. So I think you really did an excellent job on the design. On the inside, I think I'd only add that maybe you need a little more, another storage room on the second and third floor. People have Christmas trees and other odds and ends that they use periodically during the year, suitcases that go in and out, and rather than clutter up their closets or a corner of their bedroom, you know, just having a controlled common area where they can, I don't want to say store their junk, but
yes,
store the stuff that they don't use all the time, I think would be convenience. I really like the outside design of the building. I like your multiple use of textures, the articulations of the buildings where there's an inside and an outside, and it really looks like a bunch of little buildings that are all interconnected. I think that's a really classy design. You talked a little bit about the power wires in front, and we used to have a power line burying fund in hopes of trying to bury the power lines that we hope will be developed all the way down Dundee or maybe move to the back part of the lot somewhere. Andrew, maybe you could investigate the option of burying the power lines or a donation to that fund or whatever. There was something like if the power lines don't get buried in a certain amount of time, then I think you got the money reimbursed back to you, so.
Well, in contrast to the accessibility of the staff here in the village, trying to get anybody at ComEd to talk to me is going on a 20-day effort. However, I've asked them both for a determination of capacity and any improvements that they might require. Obviously, from our perspective, we'd like to see everything underground, but not to stand out from what's being done just generally in the area.
And I think your setback problem in the front, if you're going to put that solid row of hedge bushes and stuff there, I think that'd be perfect. You're going to hide the headlights and hoods of whatever cars you have. Perfect implementation. I'd be willing to trade off that few feet that you're short for a nice hedge area. Where my parents were, a lot of the elderly people drove. As a matter of fact, my dad, who was 96, 97, used to drive from Florida to Chicago every year. So don't underestimate the elderly aged people of the future. I think they're going to want to retain ownership of that car as long as they possibly can.
Well, the comment that I have to make about that is becoming sort of a practical matter. Our industry has come to realize that people want that independence, but they don't want it in our building. They want to stay in their home. We won't get them until they just can't handle things on their own. That's not always going to be driving. Okay, there are a lot of other acts of daily living that people need help with, but anybody who can maintain any independence is going to stay away from us if they can. It's just a fact of life.
Will you provide local transportation to
we'll have
stores and
hopefully a shopping center and the movies over here.
doctors' offices, et cetera, that are local to the area? Great. How about for the non-memory residents, will there be controlled access during the, I'll say, dusk hours, nighttime hours? Will they need special keys or codes?
The building will be secured from entrance from the outside, but they'll be free to go, as opposed to the memory care where there's no access except through keypad either way.
And they'll be able to get out through the, I'll call it the emergency exit doors, or the exit doors that are in the wing area?
Well, even in the memory care, they can get out through the emergency exits. It's just that we build in a delay so that if they push it and nothing happens, they walk away. But if it was a panic, it's a panic bar.
But the second and third floor people will be able to use that for entrance and exit, or, and you do, I didn't really look, you do have 4 elevators if I counted correctly in the center. So I think you really have a nice facility. I like the sidewalks. I see your sidewalks.
We didn't even know that we needed this.
Your sidewalks are tan, and the other sidewalks are kind of a pinkish color on the plan. I sure hope. Are you pretty confident that that back area will be developed like this plan? That would be a really nice facility for.
It's hard to speak for the synagogue, and I won't embarrass them by having them come before you here tonight, but they approached us from the very beginning when we started looking at buying a portion of this land and explaining to us that they wanted a community garden. And that was the extent of, the initial discussion. And it's kind of evolved from that. But most of it's been our interpretation of things that we've discussed with them. So it's coming from them pretty much. I think it's fair to say there's going to be some improvements there because we've committed some money to see them done, okay? But I can't tell you how much detail.
Okay, yeah, I mean, that would just be perfect for the residents that can get out and walk and meander, and we do have, a nice senior facility a few blocks away, so I think, the sidewalks, thank you for putting them in. One last question, right? I see you have a bar area down on the first floor. My parents really loved their place because they had a happy hour every day from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m.
That's a good happy.
Well, it's Florida too, so I mean, it's a little different down there, but they really enjoyed that, and it was a nice place to meet all the other residents and stuff.
We have had resistance from our operations people because there's some liability questions. However, I was involved with Jim at SAS in trying to make this concept work for people, and by treating them with respect and understanding that they're individuals, and even if their body's not willing to do some of the things they might like it to do, they haven't changed. They haven't become 5-year-olds. And that's not true in the memory care side, and I understand that, but we believe that there's a way to show respect by showing that, there are some things that they have enjoyed. In this case, it actually is tied more to the dining room than it is to that bar area. I absolutely hate most facilities and mealtime. All of the people show up early and stand at a door that's closed, and they wait to get in, and they rush in and sit down all together. And then they're waiting again for somebody to serve them. We want this thing to work like a restaurant. People will be sitting in that bar, lounge area, recreation area, and be called to their table as their group assembles. And it will work more like what they're used to seeing in a restaurant. And it's the least we can do. I mean, this is not a cafeteria. We're not feeding kids. And it's a very big deal with me. And it goes a long way to handle one of the biggest issues that we have in our properties, and that is meal times are the center of life, generally within the confines of the building. So why not expand it on each end with something before dinner and maybe music or something after dinner? Because most people in these properties will leave the dinner table, go to their rooms, and go to bed. And that's not what we wish for them.
And unfortunately, I do have one last, well, we'll see how it turns out. But what do you plan on doing about downspouts and stuff on your
Have you ever noticed that architects never draw those in?
How will they be internal to the facility, or will they be on the outside, and where are they going to be hidden, and how are they going?
Actually, we're probably going to have a combination of both. Because we have the sloped roofs, we'll have gutters and downspouts, and we'll bring them down and tie them into the storm sewer. And then there are some flat areas there, so we'll have some internal roof drains that'll go down and tie into the storm sewer as well.
If you would, when you get around to doing some more finalish drawings kind of show how they're going to be shown and where they're going to be visible, because sometimes they just don't fit in right. You know, you might be able to do something landscaping, and it just helps us get a little better idea of where they're going to be and what it's going to look like. But thank you very much. I really like your facility. It surely is something that we need here, so thank you.
Commissioner Dorbin.
Thank you. I like the design. I like the way it looks. I think that's a wonderful location for it. I do have a couple of questions for the landscape architect. It appears that much of the landscape, there isn't a whole lot of color, and that may be because this is an early design. But I'm thinking of these people looking out the windows, and more color, more flowering trees, things like burning bushes, things like just flowering trees, flowering bushes, benches, shaded areas. I'm not seeing a whole lot of that, and I'm just hoping that on
Your impression is correct that you're not seeing it because we really haven't gotten to that level yet. We wanted to get a little bit of a pulse reading from the commission here this evening to say, are we on the right track? And I think this is a constructive comment from you. One of the things that Autumn Leaves has insisted on is not just doing foundation planting, making it look nice and, call it grounded at the base of the building, but what does it look like from a resident window? They may be spending many hours in their room. If we can put a tree that's not just, or a shrub, not just at the base of the building where you're kind of doing one of these to look out, but you're actually seeing something that has changeability, season, birds, that's beyond the window, then we're really starting to do something that they can watch over seasons. So as far as color, this will come. So I think that when we get into specificity of plant material and foundation planting, I don't want it to look like a McDonald's where everything is, show-offy color, but I think that there will be places where at the patios and at the front entry where we will emphasize seasonality and color, and then it will calm down as it gets around the rest of the building. But where there will be people up close at front entrances or at patios, seating, shade elements, thank you, Commissioner. Those are things that we'll start to get more detail on as we go further.
Having just visited a friend in an assisted living facility, there was a lot of people sitting outside in front. Are you making accommodations for all those people to sit out there and, just sit out in front, watch people, watch the traffic,
right,
whatever?
To be able to watch some activity, I think, isn't a bad pastime. If you're 88 years old and you get to watch a cement truck and a fire truck and what have you go by, not so bad. One of the things we have to do is to balance that off and say, from the outside in, are we screening? From the inside out, if I'm a resident, I want to be able to sit in a comfortable spot, shade, and not feel like I'm part of the parking lot or the circulation. So those patios will have some landscape screening around the base of them, but you can still see over and out from them.
Well, are you saying the patios, will those patio areas be able to see out to the street? I mean, is that going to be open? Because like I said, when I went to visit my friend, there was a lot of people living there who were sitting there greeting people as they were walking in. There were people watching, they were interacting.
Right, people watching is pretty good. So there's not restricted access. If somebody parks and says, I'm going to come in through the patio way, you can do so and meet somebody who's either sitting in the living room or the dining room or out on the patio. All I was saying was that they're not going to feel like you're out in the open. Right now, if I point, the patio areas are the two front patios. Get some shade, but also get some foreground planting at the base of this. This this is the patio area, and if we can get some foundation planting along the building, and then that foundation planting kind of wraps around here, I can still walk in and feel like I've got a little bit of a controlled environment, but I'm able to see out from there as well. Similar would happen where my shrub planting around the base of this berm would probably wrap in here. I can still walk in, but I can see the coming and going and the people who are visiting.
And the other thing is, when I was visiting my friend, I was looking out her window, and outside of her window happened to be a really kind of neat little gazebo and a little seated area, and it was all filled with flowers, and it looked very appealing looking out her window. You know, have you taken into consideration all those windows that you've got for people looking out there? I mean, I know it sounds weird,
I'm taking this
but,
constructively.
you know, I mean,
I
by
haven't-
keeping the trash away so they're not looking over the trash containers and things like that.
That's going to be all contained within the loading area. So yes, the trash is not outwardly shown. It's really tucked in to this compound that's in the corner of the building. As they look out, I think they're going to have a pretty broad panorama on the north side. Buffalo Creek, they have a tree line, they have school, they have bike trail, they have the bridge, and the synagogue open space. The same to the east. It's a natural woods to the east. I think on the south, there will be foundation and foreground planting that will be able to be looked at from the resident rooms. I mean, this is one of these places where we've got trees that are beyond the windows. Again, low plantings at the base of the building, but keep the taller plantings farther away, so you do have some, you know, filtering of light, some screening, but also a close-by focal point.
The only other question I had was regarding the 911 calls. And I don't know, Andrew, if we can get some kind of a reading from Harbor House on McHenry Road on what kind of calls they get.
I think that what we can get, and really this is more of probably a question for the village board, and what we'll look at is, I think our primary question is going to be the definition of impact fees as it relates to whether this is a residential building that would require impact fees. The question that Mr. Meacher is referring to as to the potential demand for additional service. I think what he's discussing is a contribution, not so much an impact fee, but an analysis of what the additional demand would be as part of the discussion of whether or not a contribution of toward that additional service cost is suggested by the developer in this case.
I believe it was the fire chief that mentioned that there's more cost for one of those runs than Medicare, or I guess it is, that reimburses. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So that amount can be determined. If we can establish what seems to be a reasonable number of calls for this number of residents, I think that we can come to terms with paying that differential, and I'd like to just handle it like on a yearly or semi-annual basis, not monthly, so that we can offset anything if we put this extra strain on your services. But as it relates to schools or library or any of that, our people really aren't going to be using most of the services on which you collect impact fees for new users.
Then I don't remember seeing, unless I missed it, any backside pictures of what this building might look like and where the mechanicals are going to be located?
Actually, the architect described the mechanical systems that are contained within the building. They're between where the elevators are, which are central, and the kitchen area on the ground floor. It's one, yeah. So there's a big open white space straight back from the dining room. That's kitchen, and off to the side there are service areas where, I'm sorry, let the
Right, sure, yeah. So there's some limited mechanical on the first floor, but the majority of the mechanical is up on the roof over the core of the building, and that's shielded by these mansard roofs
There
that
will
we have
be
in the center.
parapets of some kind to cover
Right,
them?
well, we have the roof that comes up, and
Okay.
so, the roof comes up, and then there's a flat portion, so that'll be pretty substantial, it'll probably be 8 feet high, so you won't see.
And then what about fire department access to those roofs?
We will probably end up with stairs or an access, we just have to get up to that level, but there definitely will be
Okay,
access,
so
even
the-
for just servicing those units, that's something that.
And any of the mechanicals, or I should say, like the gas and the electric, things like that, that are on the exterior of the building?
Right, that's kind of all in the service area. We have a transformer. There's also a generator that I identified that's kind of up in the corner that'll have a fence around it. The gas meter will be all in that service area behind that screen wall.
Okay, and did I miss not seeing any back elevations of these?
No, right, at this point, we just have a front conceptual elevation to give you the flavor of the architecture. For the next meeting, we'll have complete elevations of the building.
Because anything that's on the building, that would be attached to the building, telephone or gas or whatever you would have. I just want to make sure they're as, inconspicuous as possible.
Right, everything's gonna be behind that service wall. It'll come into that point.
That's all I
Electrical,
have.
telephone, gas, water service.
Thank you, that's all I have.
Commissioner Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think your parking is fine. My mom used to live in an assisted living facility, and I kind of, know what the lots were, and I think you're fine there. I think you'll have a problem with that. I agree with Commissioner Dorban about, I was hoping to see like side mirror elevations, and I'm glad to hear that that's going to come, because I'd like to see how the materials are going to flow on the sides and the rear of the building. And I think Commissioner Stylen brought up about the downspouts and stuff, so hopefully when we see that, that'll all get tied in, and we'll have a better feeling of how that's all going to flow. You mentioned there was going to be some type of rear entrance, is that right?
Back to my
So what I meant by rear entrance is really the entrance to the memory support is at the north side of the building. There's that drop-off drive, and that's the main entrance to the memory support.
Oh, I see, okay. So anybody under memory support, they would all come through the back there, that back drive? Or they could come through
Mostly
the
the
front?
visitors would be coming in through that front. We do have another access point so that the assisted living and I don't know if that makes sense. So there's another entrance here so that you can, from the assisted living side, go into memory support. But the main entrance to memory support would be from the north side off of this drop-off area.
So anybody coming through the back, they would only be able to go into memory support, they would not be going to like the second and third floor, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Let's see here. There was a mention about like, the paver bricks in the front. I assume that on the site plan there you had like a reddish area, and that's where that area would be, right? That area is not going to be covered at all, is it? Like there won't be any kind of canopy or anything like that? Okay. The landscaping looks good. The only thing I would hope to see is, when we get to final, to see a very detailed irrigation plan. So we have a good idea of like what spots, what landscaping is going to be irrigated. That would be very important for us to see. Okay. I saw a photometric plan you had in the packet, and I have a little bit of concern on the West Drive. I haven't been by there in a while, but from Dundee Road towards the back parking area, it looked like there was like, Andrew, do you know, is there any existing lighting in that area right now?
Let me see if I can pull this up.
Because I was looking, it didn't look like there was any lighting there. I was wondering if we need to throw like a couple of bollards in there to light that up, because it looks like there's a sidewalk that goes to the back.
This area? Which area are you referring to?
Yeah. Right, that area there, and then it looks like there's a sidewalk on the east side of that driveway.
The existing bike path is not lit outside of the roadway lighting from Dundee and I believe there's some wall packs on the side of the synagogue near the loading area. But I don't believe that area is currently lit beyond those wall packs.
There's bollard lighting.
There's bollard lighting
Yes.
on the west side or east side?
On the west side of the driveway.
But the parking lot lights don't start until the back end, right?
I was asked. The taller parking lot lights are.
Start in
yeah,
the back.
in the parking lot.
It just looked to me like on the photometric plan, it didn't show a reading out in that area, so I just was concerned if that path's gonna be used, maybe we should be looking at a couple more bollard lights if people wanna walk from the front to the back at night. I don't know why that would happen, but that may be something you wanna take into consideration for safety reasons.
Since we have this shared drive, we'll sit with the synagogue, talk about the lighting right there at that access point. We've already had some comments from staff about providing some bollards where that path goes back so people aren't mistaking it for some sort of driveway.
Okay.
And for some striping and other things, or crosswalk. So we'll look at all of that.
Okay. And I guess one thing is have you guys thought about a snow removal plan? Where are you going to put all the snow? I mean, it's something you probably need to think about too in the future when it gets that far.
We thought about not buying any equipment because we've got no place to store it, but we hadn't thought about where to put the snow.
Yeah, okay. The last thing I have is a comment. I think it's a fantastic building. I'm really impressed with the materials you're using, and what you're able to do with that building with the constraints you had to work with. I mean, to me, it's pretty unbelievable what you guys came up with, and I think you did a really nice job, so.
Well, and I almost spoke over my landscape architect with Ms. Dorman's questions because there's just very limited space in the front of this building to do the kinds of things that we have done in other properties. We're going to do the best we can, and we will have color, but I just don't have a large garden.
You did a lot, and you took a lot into consideration and did a good job in a pretty restricted area, so thank you. I have nothing further.
Thank you. I have a number of things. First off, about the use, can you define, because I hear the term assisted living, and I also hear the term independent living. Place that I'm familiar with has independent living, then assisted living, then nursing care units, memory care. So in your terms, what is assisted?
The distinction is pretty easy, actually. Independent, aside from a restriction, an age restriction for who can live there, it is no different than an apartment. And the people may or may not be making all of their meals. That depends on, that property. They can provide meals. They often provide one meal a day, the evening meal, and the people take care of their own breakfast and lunch. They don't need home health care. That's the way I'll describe it. When you go to assisted living, you can expect people to have the need for 3 or 4 acts of daily living. And the list kind of goes on, but basically, if you just picture from the time you get up to the time you go to bed, where you might need help. Help even getting out of bed, dressing, bathing, toileting, those kinds of things. There could be a need for help with guiding people to the dining room, to helping with mobility issues. And each of those things are packaged as services that we just call the acts of daily living. When you go the next step, which we call memory care, the only thing that's happened here is that when a person is dealing with dementia in one form or another and becomes a wandering risk that is that they would wander off and not realize that they are putting themselves in peril, then there's a secure environment. And all that means is that they can't get out. Basically, those are the distinctions. There are variations depending on the business model, but that's basically how it works.
Okay, so your
We don't
assistant...
have anything to do with nursing care, which is
Right.
a hospital,
Right, right. Your, what you call assisted living, second and third floors, it looks like they have full kitchens. Are they full kitchens?
They are full kitchens, and I made the comment that it was very noticeable to me as I toured hundreds of properties as we were working on this concept. And it was very noticeable to me that when you walked into a typical assisted living unit, there was a little bit like you see in the limited service hotels now. You know, there's a mini fridge and a little sink, and a place for a coffee maker and microwave. It didn't feel like home. And so even though it took us money to provide that space, if when you arrive, you feel like you've come home. Now, you may have stepped down from a house, so you moved into an apartment. But that's the key. Everything we want to do here is to make it feel residential. I don't want to make it like home. I want to make it home. Okay? And that kitchen signals that for most people. I will bet you that aside from keeping some juice, maybe someone who likes to have just toast in the morning, most people will go to the meals because it's one of the main social activities. There will be some people that just don't. We don't care if they use it, just as long as they think of it as theirs.
So your model includes meals?
Yes.
Okay. So, so your dining room doesn't look large enough to handle 64 apartments. Let's just say there's 100 people, because I would assume some are going to be singles. You're going to have some couples.
It's not 64 apartments. That's where the mistake is. It's 64 residents. And they may be in shared rooms, or there may be a couple that are occupying a single room, but we count by beds. So it's 64 people, and we can't seat them all. In fact, our vacancy allows for the fact that we'll never get to that number.
Okay, interesting. But you have one or two bedroom
No.
places.
No, the description should be, they're either single occupant rooms or they're double occupant rooms. And that may be with people who are related or not related. And there aren't that many that are for two persons.
If you can go to the second floor, on the left, on the west side, doesn't that say two-bed? So that's not a two-bedroom?
No, it is a two-bed room.
A two-bed?
It is a space where we can put two individuals in that same apartment.
Right.
But we don't have 64 apartments. We have 64 beds in our county.
Oh, I see. So in what I'm looking at here is that each one of those bedrooms have their own bathrooms. And then that center area is a common area? Is that what that is? If I look at that,
That's kind of a living area in the kitchen?
right.
Right, so there's a bedroom on either side.
Right.
And a living room in the
So
center.
those are I'm just trying to understand this. So those are private rooms. You could have two unrelated people living in that area.
No. We would only have one person in each side of.
Right, but they could be unrelated.
They could be unrelated.
And then the common area there in between those two bedrooms that's just common area for just those two people?
Yes, it's like they were roommates, with their own private sleeping area.
Yeah. So those are locked areas, and the bedrooms are locked. I'm just trying to understand that concept. It's interesting. Yeah, it's like a suite, right. Like when you're in college, you have a roommate.
They don't make up that many units in the space. Our typical unit is a single room with a kitchen, a little bit of a sitting area, and then a space for the bed.
Okay.
There's 4 of those units.
Yeah, there's 4 of those units. That interesting concept. I'm trying to understand the suite, the common area that those units have. This area.
The cost of the space isn't that much less than a private room. But that's one of the reasons people would pick that space, is that it is like $500 a month less.
Oh.
So that people can share that cost. However, it is more space than you would have by yourself in a single room. You do have that common space that you're talking about. It's not as large as it may seem to you as you're looking at it.
Interesting. Because actually, what I'm looking at right now is that the 2-bed room or area, the one bedroom on the one side had its own private bathroom, but the one on the right side is a common bathroom that you can use if you're in the common area. So
If you had a guest, they would go that way.
Yeah, okay, interesting.
It's not too much different than having a guest room in your home where you had a bathroom, and that's what visitors would use.
So are these rented or are they sold, these
Oh, these are
rooms?
all rental.
They all rental?
Yes.
Okay, interesting. Okay. You mentioned you had properties in the area, and I think the autumn leaves are in a whole bunch of areas in here. And you mentioned Vernon Hills and Arlington Heights. Vernon Hills is already built, and Arlington Heights, you're breaking ground. Could you get Andrew the addresses of those so we might visit them?
Sure.
Okay. And is Vernon Hills and or Arlington Heights, are they similar in the use, memory care, and then assisted living? Do you
No.
have any of those?
We don't. This is our first, in Chicago area, this is our first assisted living. We have properties in Dallas that do assisted living, and we even have independent in one property. But this is really our first effort here in Chicago. In fact, it's the first, what we hope becomes a prototype for us.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, if you get those addresses, we'd like to go see how they're built. So a couple of things a couple of suggestions that I have is you talk about fencing around the garden areas. We definitely want those defined, in your plans, what they are. Are they wrought iron? Are they wood? Whatever, okay? And then also, you said you have some type of generator to the east side of the property. How is that going to be enclosed? And we'd like to see those types of things. Somebody talked about people coming, if they live in the area, and they might bike there. Are you going to have bike rack somewhere? Okay. We need to see that on the plan. In addition, you talked about you're going to have a service that will take them to grocery stores, when we get our town center here, movies. Are you going to be owning those vehicles?
Yes.
Okay, so where, so that means that's additional parking space?
Yeah, it'll actually just be one.
Okay. And also things like benches, locations of benches on these plans where they're going to be. We'd like to see those. You talked about one of the materials was stucco, but I heard we were going to hardy board, cementitious something.
We would actually take a little direction here. We think that the stucco, because it doesn't stand out as a distinct style as a material, it kind of blends in, that look where it appears, which is an accent on the third floor only, would be perfectly fine. We've heard somewhere that maybe this is what a lot of people do with their stucco and their little bit of brick and stuff, and might not be as acceptable here in the community. And if that's the case, my first preference would be to have a low-maintenance material, and the hardy board in, you know, a lap siding configuration would be just fine. It doesn't matter that much in the scheme. It'll be in the color, not in the actual look of that siding.
Right,
It's not
exactly.
going to stand out that much.
Right.
Probably it's easier to do the stucco treatment.
Opinion on that? Commissioner Stylin?
I think I'd rather see the cement fiberboard type material. It seems to be a little bit more durable, I think, than synthetic stucco.
Right. And that's what I was thinking about.
That's real easy to do.
Right. The previous petitioner that was here, we talked about that, and we actually talked about even a thicker board because of the cold weather here. It's more durable. So is everybody in agreement with that? Do I hear a bunch of nods there? See a bunch of nods? I can't hear nods, but I can see them. Great, thank you. Okay. How come no balconies?
Which I didn't go through.
How come no balconies on second and third floor?
You know, Jim, since it's your design from the ground up, I know why I am.
Well, typically, we find that the assisted living resident really doesn't use that balcony because of mobility issues, getting out into the balcony. So they tend to go down and use the patios. We do that more in independent living. We did meet with the fire chief, and I think he was concerned about residents being able to go on balconies. I think he had we had some balconies on the project at one time at the ends, and he had some concerns about that and asked us to please kind of remove that. Thought it was kind of a safety issue that I'm not sure. I thought he had the impression that I think we were going to put memory support residents on the second and third floor, and he was worried that they'd jump off or something. So we ended up taking those off and just adding glass. But in our experience, that really assisted living residents wouldn't really use their balcony. We sometimes do it on independent living, but not on assisted.
Well, it's also an appearance thing too. From our standpoint, it's almost like the gutters and downspouts. It distinguishes the building as chopped up as apartments instead of the building itself having an overall look that we'd like to see. We think we're providing adequate places for people to enjoy the outdoors, and we are very hopeful that the synagogue, gets very enthusiastic about their plans for their part of it, because this could be very enjoyable for our residents and certainly a selling feature for the building.
Sure. TV, internet, how do you provide that?
We haven't talked about that yet. There will be internet access. There's space within the library as a business center, and I'd almost call it an internet cafe, except there's no food or anything. But I mean, there will be access at a central location. We haven't talked about what we provide for the residents throughout the building. I don't imagine we would hesitate to do it. It's nothing to wire it.
So would individual rooms be able to pick the type of...
We do that with phones. We set it up so that each, just using phones as an example, we set it up so that each room can have its own phone service. That goes back to a central location. And the resident has to decide if they want it or not. Or the family, in the case of memory care, will decide whether they want mom or dad to have a phone. I think that the internet service would be the same. It would be separately charged to the individuals. We provide, water, sewer, and electric. But those other things, cable TV will be there. But again, it's a subscription service if they have to.
What about satellite? What if somebody wants satellite?
I haven't done any work on whether cable is available. If it's cable, we'd use it as a preference over satellite.
But can individual resident pick satellite if they want?
Whatever is universally decided for
Your
the
rent,
property.
that's true. Okay,
It's
And
a matter
just-
of hanging things out of windows and that kind of stuff.
okay, all right. And again, you've got mechanicals for that too, you've got, and like, well, if you have internet cafes, I assume you're going to have Wi-Fi hotspots and, okay, that,
Well, and there are things that we haven't talked about here. We have a lot of low voltage services providing security, cameras, door locking systems, calls, pager systems, and things like that through the building.
okay, all right.
That's just a universal thing.
Since we're in the building, first floor to the right of the dining area, you've got that area where you've got receiving and you've got trash. Is that a closed area? Define what that is. Give me what you're doing in that area.
Well, let's start with trash. And again, sure.
He was ready to get up and then he sat down.
Great job.
I get all excited about this because I was involved in this building. I feel like I birthed this thing.
So this is really an outdoor area. I think what we're probably going to look at doing is putting a kind of a screen roof on that and some fence in the front, but it's outside. And so we have a mechanical room and some receiving and some storage and housekeeping. There's a staff lounge and the kitchen and the dietitian and some washrooms for the staff. Kind of back of house. And then there's also access to two-sided elevator, so you can do housekeeping service. And then there's a trash chute that collects trash to bring it out.
So is that separate and distinct? Is it curbed off? That area there?
This area here,
Trucks are going to back in, I would assume, back in for, they're going to be dropping off food, whatever that they have, so.
It'll be curved and it'll be defined by this wall along here, this 8-foot wall, and then we'll probably end up putting some bollards here just to keep the truck from backing up too far.
That's where we talked about having a 4-foot wall on top of a 4-foot berm. So
Okay.
on the street side, it looks like a short wall, but it's an 8-foot high wall on the interior.
Okay. So then when you get to that trash enclosure, we'd probably want that defined too. What's the material going to be used?
Sure.
When you get into the drawings. Okay, good, thank you. Then, I know, Andrew, the two things that we talked a little bit about is the use, which isn't defined within our code. So how do we go about defining this? And then tied to that is the parking.
There's two options. If this were your typical property and you were developing it as a assisted living, what I would suggest to the petitioner and the Plan Commission is a zoning code text amendment to cover the definition of the use, what zoning district that use is allowed in, and the parking regulations specific to that use. In this case, as a plan unit development, I think you have a second option, which is for the petitioner, for the purpose of this particular plan unit development, to define all of those things, spell it out, have a site, as you have on the site plan, there's a data table that describes the parking analysis. Their projection of parking can be part of this plan unit development. The way that they provide it can be defined, their number of employees on the peak shift, et cetera. And then as well as that, you have the use, the definition of how they want to break down this building. This portion of it is memory care, define that in one way. This portion is assisted living, define that another way. I think that either one of those options is fine. If the Plan Commission had a preference, this would be the time to provide that direction.
Commissioner Stalin?
I personally like the latter suggestion that it's PUD descriptive based upon the current use, the current design of the property, the current implementation. I think because it's a rental facility of a very specific type use, if they don't have sufficient parking and a resident really wants to have parking, he'll go find another facility where he can get what he wants. So, you know, I don't want to get too detailed in defining something in the zoning code that locks us in forever. This seems to be a good custom fit for a PUD. It's kind of what it's about.
And I didn't spend any time describing our relationship with the synagogue as it relates to cross-use. We have functions. In fact, it was one of the concerns the fire marshal brought up, and I was glad he had.
Could you pull the microphone a little bit closer, please?
That the fire marshal or fire chief had said that he had seen situations where there was a special event at the property, and the parking was not adequate. Well, we have that cross-use with the synagogue. Our functions take place in the evening, and we definitely get a lot of response around Mother's Day and certain other holidays. Should not conflict with the synagogue's use of the property. So we have the right, by asking permission for that specific night, to use that for our overflow parking, and we'll be able to handle any unusual traffic that way.
Commissioner Dorban, what do you, your opinion on that? Your comments about how we're going to handle the parking to
Zoning code amended.
the zoning code amended versus in the PUD? What Commissioner Steinle was talking about.
You mean as far as
How we address this special use. We can do it either through a text amendment or through the PUD.
honestly, I don't know how to answer that. I think staff is probably,
Microphone.
I'm sorry, I think staff would probably be better to direct us on the best way to go with that.
Okay.
I don't,
Anybody else have opinion on that?
I kind of like the PUD.
Yeah. I think we should go down the PUD.
well, Andrew, how would we handle it? I mean, what is the best
I don't
way?
think that there's a best way in this case. I think the application for the plan unit development certainly gives them the ability to provide parking analysis to support their specific parking demand and the requirement that they're setting out for themselves. Likewise, they can define how this building can be used by saying this certain portion of it is memory care and define that, and this certain portion of it is assisted living and define that. They can go into so much detail as to say that there will be an overnight registered nurse. There will be support staff of this variety in the building. The building will have accessory functions such as common library space, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that the PUD gives it the flexibility it needs. If there was a direction to set a new definition into our code, I think they could certainly do that as well. I don't think that there's anything wrong with doing it either way.
Great, thank you. Good. Couple of more things. The West Drive is going to be widened. And I believe the synagogue sign is right there. Is that going to have to move? Do you know yet?
And I didn't know that we necessarily had to widen it, so.
It looked wider.
No, we were widening it to add a left turn lane in there, so we have a right turn
Yeah.
out, a left turn and a right turn in, or just a turn in. So we were widening that, and I thought that we potentially would need to move that sign, but we have to take a closer look at that.
Okay, so I assume that will have to be defined when we come. Okay, the last thing I have, and we've talked about it, is the properties behind your buildings, or, and in spite of you saying that it's not going to be addressed at any time when you bring in your final drawings or your drawings, I just have a concern that we're talking about a lot of what-ifs. And I look at it as one development, because we're talking about areas, garden areas that not only the synagogue could use, but your building could use. And we've got no plans there. We've got no timelines. We've got no skin in the game here. And to me, these things have to be defined and done, so we have some time frame around that, along with this building.
Well, as it happens, we know that the synagogue will have some zoning issues to bring before the plan commission. So, Mr. Representative here, if you don't mind sharing where they are on this.
We're okay with that? Yeah. Yeah, it's nothing.
Sorry, I was keeping you out of this.
Hi, my name's Glenn Graff, Graff. I'm the president of Shir Hadash. And do you need my address? Or? Sure. 473 Thorndale, Thorndale Drive, Buffalo Grove. So we've been working closely with LaSalle Group. We're very excited about the prospect of partnering with them on this. They're going to help us provide some financing, some funds to help build out the back, and we're hoping to be able to build that, we're still working on what it would actually cost to do all the things we'd like to do, but we're hoping we can do it while they're building the rest of the project, was our time frame. I mean, we still have a lot of work to do to create plans that work for everyone. We're at the concept stage, not a pricing stage yet, so that can impact things. But I mean, one of the reasons we want to do this is right now the land is just open grass, and we want to have built out and make it usable. So that's our plans at the moment.
Do you have some zoning actions that you need to attend to?
I think that we just technically will have to amend our special, I understand, we'll need to amend our special use to incorporate the new land we'll be acquiring, but I don't know that we, other than that, expanding our special use to include that and, getting, obviously the property we're selling will no longer be within our special use. I think that was the extent of what we're planning on. We do, that's the main thing we'll be coming in for, is expanding our special use.
And I'm not certain that comes before us, that type of work. And I realize, sir, that you're very well intentioned in what you want to do, and what you've delivered so far there has been really good. But to me, I'm looking at this as one development, and I know, sir, that you're saying it's not, but when I look at this and we talk about potential here, there's got to be some timeframes around it.
There is something that does tie us together, and that is this funding. This money is not going to just go in the coffers. It's going to go to this purpose, or it's not going to be spent. Okay, so, and it's significant money.
And I realize that, but it's just the when. I realize that you're invested in, and so is the synagogue, from what I hear. But it's just a time frame, just the when.
We don't want to put anybody on the spot tonight, but we'll get our heads together and come with a concrete plan for you when we bring in our.
I think we as a board. This would not be a concrete design, but a concrete commitment maybe as to timing. Would that be fair?
But, I mean, yeah, I mean, before we close, we have to have an agreement on the landscape plan as part of our contract. So we're going to have a plan on what that's going to look like before we actually sell the property to them. And we needed to make some steps forward before we went to that.
And some of that information would be very helpful when we get to that point. Okay, great. That's good. That's good. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
I mean, even something as simple as, a concept plan that may be divided into multiple phases over multiple years, I think.
Right,
would be-
exactly, yeah, exactly. You know, I'm not putting a boundary of it for a year, and that's a very good idea, Commissioner Steinle, something that would be agreeable to you, because there is a cost to you too, that we can have it done in phases, that 5 years from now, we're going to have this beautiful, because it's a great concept. Love the idea.
Yeah, truthfully, we're hoping that we can manage what we want to do within the
Excellent.
financial commitments we
Great.
have. And so that way, if we can manage that, then the timing would be accelerated.
Great, that's fantastic. Good to hear. Thank you. Thank you. Do we have any other questions?
I think I have a quick one.
It's quite all right. It's a workshop.
I know initially you talked about, I guess you're asking for compensatory storage like across the street, and you mentioned about directing the water into the creek. Does staff have any concern that since we're going to be putting a building on that area, that runoff into the creek could cause flooding on, let's say, the north side of the creek into adjacent, like into the school property, or isn't there a little bit of residential like to the northeast of there? Is there any concern in that area or no?
Part of what the petitioner is providing in terms of the engineering plans, and Mr. McCabe, correct me if I'm wrong on this, part of what they're providing is an analysis of exactly what the impact on the creek accepting this water is going to be. So it's the creek and then the reservoir that it actually receives the water. So they're providing some fairly detailed analysis of a couple of different types of events. So it's when the water is coming off the site, how much water is in the creek. It's a fairly complicated model, I believe, that we're actually receiving from them.
There's actually, the firm that studied the whole creek and designed that whole thing, we're going to work with them to get their report. They've done, all the work's done. We just have to put in the model, this area being developed as opposed to being vacant land.
Okay.
And they may have already assumed, part of their report may have already taken into account that all these projects were going to be developed to try to make everything work. So that will be like Andrew said, that'll be submitted at the next level.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I had a couple from the staff, just to set the expectation for the formal review. Just a handful of things. We are requiring the subdivision to be part of the formal submittal. So the subdivision, at least the preliminary subdivision, has to be defined for the formal submittal. That's going to include some of the elements, the draft at that point of how the public access across the rear would be handled, how the shared access drive, so some of the definition of the shared elements, to what extent the parking is permanently shared versus on the as-needed basis. We need some of that fleshed out to understand how this PUD is going to work. We had less of a concern about the area that's going to end up in the synagogue's possession, with the understanding, of course, that they would need to go through at least a minor site plan approval to develop that. Our concern is more with the access, shared access, to the extent that this particular development is going to need for it to work. Where's the shared access? What part is shared parking? What ability does the synagogue have to use the parking that is on this plan? That sort of those sort of issues is what we wanted to make sure that, in addition to the final definition of land for this PUD, how are the parking and access to it affected? We covered preliminary final, setting the expectation, if it's possible to go through that. Were there any comments from a staff perspective? What we would expect this petitioner to provide would be the final plans, whether or not the Plan Commission will accept that as a simultaneous preliminary and final. Are there any particular items that are, as I said, we will be anticipating a final submittal, the lighting, et cetera, that's required with final submittal. Are there any other items of concern that the commission has on this?
Commissioner Stata?
You know, I really don't have a problem with kind of compressing the preliminary final thing, but I'm just wondering if, because we're trying to do so much, if we could have a workshop or something, you know, because I don't want to get the preliminary plan and then say we have to, this is it, it's the final, we have to approve it in one sitting. What happens if we want you to make some tweaks to it or whatever? I would like to have just a little bit of buffer time to be able to do some minor adjustments and tweaking. And whether you call it a workshop or an extension of the preliminary, you know, into 1 or 2 meetings.
Because, yeah, because Commissioner Steinle, I agree. My concept as a final is that it's basically a rubber stamp. And I just don't, you've got a great start here and a great plan, but to me, and we've had this discussion, we just went through it, final to us is final, that there really shouldn't be a lot of discussion by Plan Commission members about changing, you know, a material or you know, parking issues and things like that. And that's what concerns me about skipping that
I think the
preliminary.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I think that the staff, what the staff perspective on this was, is that if you had a building like this come to you with a full set of plans that wasn't in an area that required PUD approval, it would be, if you took it at its basic level here, you're talking about a single building, single use, single owner, single site, one phase development, as opposed to a PUD where you typically have multiple buildings, possibly multiple uses. So what we were looking at it is sort of the special use site plan review is comparable to what this ultimately is. Whether or not they are able to achieve that in a single meeting would be similar to an average special use review. So
yeah,
we don't really have a preference. But there's a couple of different ways you could do this. There could be a preliminary hearing, and like any other hearing, you can continue it to a second meeting. It could be a preliminary, and you go to final a week later, 2 weeks later.
But I think, that, you know, if we're going to try and compress the time frame, we need all the staff reports, not only the staff recommendations coming as part of what we normally do in the preliminary, we need to have all that stuff resolved by staff, you know, the fire department stuff, the engineering stuff, all done beforehand so we don't get, you know, normally the final is when we had to make an adjustment for the fire department, we had to make an adjustment for engineering. So a lot of the onus, I think, is getting those issues resolved up front when it comes to us, so we don't have to go through those corrective type processes.
And I don't want to use it as an example, but the previous petitioner, that was a special use, and you're equating it to a special use, one building, one use, but they still had to come back for two meetings. And we had a lot of changes with them. Now, granted, it's retail, it's something that we have, but I just don't want to get into that and then and it could be all perception on our part that we're into a corner where we can't make changes.
Sure, I think what I've heard and what I think this petitioner has heard is don't count on it being a guarantee. If this is done and staff has no concerns, fire department has no concerns, at the time of this hearing, if it's the discretion of the commission at that time, it's a possibility. But it's not something from your timing perspective from a timing perspective, you should still budget your time to have the Plan Commission make a preliminary PUD recommendation and have the board make a preliminary PUD approval, and then have the Plan Commission make a final PUD recommendation and have the, so you should budget your time for the 4 public meetings, Plan Commission Board, and if it's possible, if your package is complete, there are no issues, the Plan Commission is open to that consideration.
I think we'll just, first of all, we don't have any objection to these steps.
No, I don't understand.
So what we want to do, we'll compress the time between the meetings as opposed to eliminating meetings.
Sure, sure.
Because we are pretty well prepared, and this was very helpful this evening. We're going to be able to come back with a lot of this done, and I think that should invite us to come back, you know.
Great.
I don't know if it fits, when you're making changes, and, you know, we had to submit 8 days ahead of time to the Planning Commission, you know, for this particular thing. If we can turn our materials around and then get to the village board, then back out of that, when it changes there and come back.
And
It's the lead times.
right, and what we have done, and we just did it, and I'm going to use the previous petitioner as an example, is they were here last Thursday. And normally, we require all of our packets to us on the Friday, so they only would have had less than 24 hours to turn around. We gave them some latitude to get the information to us by Tuesday, by Monday, as long as we had the information by Tuesday. So we can't do that, and I would assume that once we get rolling here, the changes that we're going to be making to you are going to be small, that you would be able to turn around those things. So, and we have that latitude to do that.
Good. That's more than fair.
Right. Would everybody agree with that? Okay, great.
So that was my second item. I have a couple faster ones. The variations, right now I've heard a couple of things. We will work with you on exactly what variations from the zoning code are included in this development. We know off the top of our heads the parking setback. We need to determine if this is a residential building and has any sort of standard of a residential building with respect to unit sizes, or if these are not so much units from that standard of our code. So we have to figure that out. The definition of what the use is might take care of that, actually. So there's a couple of things that we need to figure out. They have not been defined as independent at any point in this discussion. They've been
You know, I'm
clearly...
sure I'm missing some subtleties we can have access to as we've had.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, you've made this distinction from your other projects that there is no independent area, fully independent area. And if that's the case, we may not consider these to be independent units as much as rooms that happen to have kitchens. So we'll figure that out. The PUD defined the use, compensatory storage we've discussed. The issue of IDOT and the approval with the curb cut, I think with the, if you continue to pursue this as a right in, right out, I don't think that you have any issue, the east curb cut, I don't think you have any issues with IDOT with that. So we'll have to discuss having a preliminary review through IDOT's permitting office just to make sure that there's no red flag issues before this comes back. And I believe that's it. That's all I had.
Great. Any final comments from the board? Mallory? Anybody? No? Well, that's it for tonight. Thank you.
Appreciate this, a lot of time you've taken to this.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Very well prepared. Thank you.
Yeah, good job.
Makes it easier for us. And, you know, as far as colors and things like that, if those are also set when you come back, as far as what you're going to have for your materials, the colors, you know, you said that it's sort of like this color, so we definitely know what those are, and they're in the, you know, just things like that would be very helpful. Great.
Outstanding.
For them.
Thank you. Have a good evening. Have a good weekend. Other business, oh, no, we have approval of minutes, I'm sorry. Approval of minutes from August 14th.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Other business, Mr. Jennings?
In the interest of time, what I'd like to do, we have a public hearing on the zoning code scheduled for September 11th. What I'd like to do, because it is getting somewhat late, we did send out a couple of items. Off the top of my head, what we're looking at in this zoning code update, we've talked about the timing in the PUD review, where the preliminary building materials work into the concept review. Is that a formal approval or not? There were no issues when we displayed that draft code on the screen. The only issue that we ran into was the related section, which was the building material standards themselves. That we distributed some materials. What I'd like to do is if you could take a look at those materials over the next week or so. We have some time to try to incorporate comments from the commissioners. This will be an item for an open meeting, public meeting. Please do not copy each other on it, but if you have the time to look through the materials that the staff provided for this workshop, if you could send us any particular suggestions you have, that way we can take the suggestions in and be better prepared for our hearing on September 11th, and hopefully have I think at that point we may end up continuing it 1 week to tweak some things, but at least we can try to incorporate some of your comments. We had also asked if you find particular structures that you think exemplify the zoning code standard that we should be shooting for, give us an address. If you have a photograph, we can try to put words to that and have that be in the first draft of this code that you see coming in front of you on September 11th.
And that was the email that you sent on the 26th?
Yes, we have received a couple of comments. We can incorporate those already. So if Commissioner Stylen did send us some review comments back, but if other commissioners have any particular items that they'd like to see when we come back with the draft code on September 11th, please feel free to get those to us. Just aside from the building material standards and the PUD procedure, we have a couple of minor changes that are in the works. We have a public hearing deposit that we want to clean up in the code. It's not working as intended. It's a staff item, doesn't really have much to do with the business of the commission. We do have a relatively, about a 2-year-old requirement, regulation related to front yard paving that is not working exactly as intended, so we'd like to modify that very slightly just so that it functions better for the Wheeling residents. Beyond that, I don't have any other major issues for this that we can go over at this point.
Great. Thank you. Other business. Commissioner Vito.
I have nothing.
Commissioner Zangara.
Just to everyone have a safe holiday.
Great. Commissioner Johnson.
Nothing.
Commissioner Dorbin.
I only have a comment that Salada is open, and everybody ought to go take a little ride over there at Lexington and Lake Cook. It's a really nice facility, and they have a lot of nice, fresh product.
I think they're having a grand opening.
On the 4th?
4th, I
Yes.
think? Yeah, on the 4th.
What is it?
But they do have a soft opening now.
Yeah. Oh, do they? Okay, cool.
Andrew, could you send, if they're going to have a grand opening, could you send out a message to the
It
commission?
was. 4th at 10:30.
Yeah, I think you got one. Yeah. Did you get one, Commissioner Vito?
Yeah, James Crapple
Yeah.
yesterday.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Commissioner Stylen.
Thank you. I have maybe an embarrassing question, but at last Monday's board meeting, there was some question about how apartment-size rooms are measured. I think the petitioner was measuring outside of the wall to the outside of the wall. We measure inside of the wall to the inside of the wall. And the result was a change of 800 square foot room down to a 600 square foot room. And that just seemed to be, to me, a little odd for the thickness of a wall. But there seemed to be some concern that we don't have a definition of how measurements are to be taken. And yet, I thought we were governed by the International Building Code or some standard organization set of codes. Don't they define how things are supposed to be measured?
The modification that was done was at the request of their architect, actually. The section of the zoning code that sets a minimum unit size is not the building code. The building code minimum square footage areas tend to relate to either an occupancy for safe exit or sleeping areas have another calculation. So our zoning code, the only definition in our zoning code of how to calculate a unit size that you would use was inappropriate. It was the square footage calculation for parking requirements, and it was not intended for the same use. So what they were requesting was clarification. They're in the process of producing the construction drawings, and they wanted to make sure before they went through all of that everybody was on the same page with how to measure. So what they did was propose a defined method of measurement to arrive at the same unit. So the unit is the same unit that was reviewed. We went through the plans that they provided to us and checked the inside dimensions to make sure that the usable space for the resident matched everything that was previously displayed to the commission and board. So after we confirmed that, we accepted their proposed method of measurement. The question I think that we have going forward, and there's two questions actually going forward, is what minimum unit sizes are we shooting for? We're not prepared with any research yet. We've talked to Chairman Rafato about this, and our plan is to do some research into minimum unit sizes, see what's out there, see what the rationale behind it. So that's one part of it. And then the other side of it is this is pointed out that we don't have an appropriate method of measurement in the zoning code to pair up with that minimum unit size. So we're looking at both of those things. We're not ready today with any sort of research or proposal for what to put in the code, but that's where we are right now.
But the methodology of doing that kind of measuring isn't in the international standard or whatever the...
I think their methodology is specific to the different uses. So the egress from a room, and you have the minimum square foot of sleeping area per person. So there's different things set up. So all that to say, we have to look into it. We have to look at the zoning code, what's missing from the code. And then the other question we've been asked to look at is the unit sizes themselves. You know, measurement aside, what unit size, what's the rationale for setting a minimum unit size and kind of what's out there, okay?
Okay, thanks. That's all I have.
Commissioner Powers?
Nothing, thank you.
And I have, actually, and Commissioner Stein, Commissioner Dorban had brought up the same question that you had too. So it's good, and I asked staff to start looking into that and do some investigation into it. That's what they're doing. I have nothing else either. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
We're done. Thank you all. Because it was on...